When Judge Harold Benson calls, I always know the job's going to be interesting. So, when he rang me this time in the middle of the night, I just knew this case was going to be unusual. He had the knack for pulling the one oddball court filing out of a stack of about 100 other nearly identical ones. The judge is a great guy and has given me a lot of business over the years. I've learned to trust his nose for mischief. If he thought something stank, it almost invariably did. He wasn't the best federal bankruptcy judge in New Hampshire for nothing, even if he always had a lousy sense of time. Just because he reads case briefs until 2:30 a.m. every morning didn't mean everyone else was awake and eager to chat. "Mike, what do you know about Eagle Airworks?" he asked me. I didn't know much, but had heard the name before and recited what I could remember. Started up right after World War II by Franklin Eagle, an Army Air Corps pilot, and a bunch of his wartime maintenance buddies. They decided to design and build small commercial and military transport planes and found a nice niche market until the late 1980s. They've had some hard luck since then. Supposedly, Eagle died a few years back when his private plane crashed, didn't he? They're up north in the White Mountains somewhere. Not a great place to be flying planes if you ask me. Since you're asking about them, I assume they filed for bankruptcy? Yes, a Chapter 7. It looks like they want to close up shop for good. They've been mostly shut down already for the last 2 to 3 years, since the son-in-law running things died in a crash while testing one of their latest prototypes. Can you be in my office at 9:30 a.m. tomorrow morning and be prepared to drink a lot of coffee? Sure, not a problem at all, I replied, especially since the judge only bought Kona coffee and had a 9,000 coffee machine in his office to brew it in. It was amazing how many folks routinely just stopped in to say hi each day, also grabbing a cup of his coffee while they were there. The court session that Friday morning was long, involved, and very productive. Together with a couple of us attorneys, a senior assistant to the state attorney general, and a junior prosecutor from the U.S. Attorney General's office who was a genius at sniffing out traces of fraud, we sat until early evening reviewing all of the filed bankruptcy documents. We all agreed that something did stink, but we couldn't put our fingers on it. The company seemed to absolutely hemorrhage money its last couple of years. Fraud, incompetence, plain old vanilla misapplication of funds. No one could tell for sure. A conference call with the FAA accident investigators responsible for the inquiries into both plane crashes was both enlightening and futile. They were both indeed a bit suspect, but had been attributed to pilot error, a possible fuel contaminant, and poor flying conditions for Franklin Eagle's crash in 1986, and both engine failure and pilot error for the death of his son-in-law, David Rollins, in 1992. But for each case, the investigators did have their doubts, and sabotage weighed heavily in each of their minds. They just couldn't prove anything. Both cases were considered closed, pending future evidence. The 1992 crash of David Rollins and 2 other company employees was in an especially hard-to-reach area of the mountains, and bad winter weather had prevented the investigator from spending more than 45 minutes total at the crash site, most of which was already snow-covered. By spring, his investigation budget had been exhausted, and his supervisor had more important cases for his investigation time, so the case had been reluctantly closed. This was about par for FAA. Civilian crash investigation chalked them up to pilot error unless a big fat smoking gun could be otherwise found. The White Mountains are kind of a strange place to begin with, known for their suddenly changing winds and other erratic meteorological phenomena. Plane crashes in the area are not uncommon and are often very hard to get to for a proper forensic post-crash examination. Often, the very hard mountain stone scatters the wreckage so widely upon impact that reassembling the wreckage is nearly futile and not FAA cost-effective for small personal accidents that don't involve commercial passengers. Like I thought earlier, it wouldn't be my choice for a place to spend your life flying planes, especially brand new experimental ones. Franklin Eagle was a different kind of character, though, and had a set of guts bigger than most folks. Certainly, things went downhill fast for his company after his death. The court had already approved an independent third-party bankruptcy manager for Eagle Airworks by the name of Robert Lacey, who was now in charge of all daily operations and expenses and responsible for liquidating all of the remaining company assets. I would be assigned to work under him theoretically, but in actuality, I would be directly working for the U.S. Bankruptcy Court District of New Hampshire, with a peculiar dual reporting to the state's Attorney General's office. The judge was pulling out all of the stops for this one. My job was to find the fraud and probable multiple homicides that this case reeked of, and I was given signed court orders and warrants, giving me vast legal powers to conduct my investigation, and an operating budget more than sufficient to track down any lead I felt was promising. I did get some interesting last-minute candid advice from the judge and the senior assistant to the Attorney General for the state of New Hampshire. The governor, I was told, is watching this case closely and has a personal interest in it. He was a longtime friend and hunting buddy of Franklin Eagle's and wanted Eagle Airworks saved if it was at all possible, for Sarah's sake if nothing else. Also, at least 2 different U.S. senators were showing an interest in this case as well, each citing national security reasons for keeping Eagle functional if at all possible. If I needed anything to successfully complete this investigation, I was to have it. Penny pinching, always a necessity in some of my more normal jobs, was not even to be considered an option. If I could find Franklin's killer, every cent in the federal and state treasury was available for my use. I had my orders now, and I had every conceivable tool at my disposal to do my job, and I was now chomping at the bit to get to work. This was what I did best, forensic accounting, and I was good enough at it that I had been able to work for myself as a consultant for about 5 years now. I had a growing stable of private corporations that I did flash audits for, and I was getting an increasing amount of work from the bankruptcy courts, usually involving fraud or possible fiduciary mismanagement cases like this one. I phoned my new boss, Robert Lacey, and made arrangements to meet him bright and early Saturday morning at a little bed and breakfast in the small town of Greenville, which was close to Eagle's factory. I was told that the path had been cleared for me and that he understood I would be bringing along a few friends. This was an understatement. ID made about 5 very productive phone calls already that morning before calling him and assured him we'd all have a very busy but hopefully productive weekend. The drive from Concord up to Greenville, nestled up in the White Mountains, wasn't especially fun in the dead of night, even in the nice late spring weather we'd been having, and took longer than I had expected. I was already pooped when I checked into my BB and somehow found a way to shut my brain off from thinking about the case long enough to get a few quality hours of sleep. It was going to be a very long weekend. Bright and early at 8:30 a.m., Robert arrived, and I introduced myself, Mike Hunter, to him. He and I had a long strategy session over breakfast. The pathway had indeed been well cleared in advance for me. Robert had thrown a fit over the rodent problem in both the corporate offices and at the manufacturing plant, saying he couldn't sell this dump with mice running around everywhere. He had shut everything down, not that much was happening anyway, and sent everyone home with orders not to return until Wednesday, until the exterminators were done. In fact, the exterminators were on call now and just waiting for the go-ahead to start their pest treatment, but Robert and I had some fun prepared that would happen first. He also commented that he had orders from the court and above to drag his feet as much as possible to give me time for my investigation, and that he was encouraged to make as many enemies as possible and try to stir up as much trouble as he could while he was there to be my lightning rod. Angry people in this business often make mistakes, and we were hoping for a lot of them. About 10:30, my other critical team player for the opening act of our drama arrived on stage with his supporting cast of actors and actresses, all hungry after several hours on the road. So, a second breakfast was enjoyed by all as we prepared our final weekend battle plan of action. The plan was simplicity itself since I had no budgetary impediments. Timothy Jones, IT guru better known to his friends as Tim the Wizard, had gathered his full staff of hackers, server wizards, and telecommunications freaks, and every piece of electronic equipment at Eagle was going to get modified to monitor and report via the internet everything that either had happened or would happen. Server data backup tapes going back years would be duplicated and analyzed. Every email that had ever been sent from their MS Exchange server would be examined. And every computer in the company would have a new hardware edition that would secretly keylog and monitor every action done. Getting and maintaining remote access to so many computers would have crippled their existing fractional T1 internet connection. So we replaced their bland service with a fiber-upgraded T3 connection that would give Tim all of the bandwidth he'd ever need going both up and down to do all of his playing with. Naturally, all telephone calls were now going to be monitored too, and a new piece of hardware was added to the central PBX that saved a copy of every call to one of the server hard drives for one of Tim's staff to download and analyze. Yes, I had valid court orders and warrants for all of these searches and more. The good judge had been very busy, and the state attorney general also knew exactly what I was going to be up to. Almost never did I have these resources to conduct an investigation, and often had to build a fraud case with far, far less. It was nice, this once, to have the full power of the government behind me, and I was hoping this would gain me more high-profile cases to investigate in the future. With the budget we had for this project, there was little need for subtlety. We decided early to go in hard and fast, and right for the throat. Everyone wanted this case done quickly, and instead of a normal grinding investigation that could last at least 6 months or more, we were all hoping to be done within about 6 weeks. All of this great fun took the next 36 hours to accomplish, and by Monday evening, we had released our genuine exterminating crew to go forth and vanquish their rodent foes, while telling them to be extremely thorough and move every piece of equipment that they could. We hoped that this new massive disruption of every work area would camouflage the fact that our IT crew had been working in every office all weekend long. In fact, they didn't finish their spraying and bait planting until mid-afternoon. Tuesday, and already senior management was screaming about the disruption to their office work and schedules. Good. Late Tuesday night, I got a brief call from Tim saying that everything was looking good and that all of the data from everywhere was mostly downloaded and ready to be analyzed by his team. Early indications were interesting, but had need at least another week of work before he would even offer some preliminary conclusions. Plus, all of the real fun wouldn't start until tomorrow anyway, and we had a good laugh over that. The real fun always started when your quarry began to suspect that something was up and would hopefully start to panic just a bit and begin to try to cover their tracks, so to speak. By watching what computer files and emails suddenly got deleted, this would give you a roadmap to what names and past activities were deemed sensitive. Like a spotlight, this would show us exactly where to concentrate our searches and where to best concentrate our investigative resources. We didn't have long to wait. Wednesday being the first real work day since the closure, Robert started things right off with a bang and introduced me as his new financial assistant who would be helping him review the financials. Then, at the end of the meeting, he casually dropped the bombshell. Oh, by the way, some state accounting folks and an IT guy or two working for the court would be coming probably sometime early next week to get some copies of all of the financials. Robert spent the rest of the day perfecting his scumsucker act and harassed everyone, asking for old, randomly selected financial records that he would pretend to be looking over with a fine-tooth comb, but in actuality was paying little attention to them. Everything on paper, we were sure, was pretty much bogus anyway. When Tim told us what old financial records started to get deleted or revised, then we would know exactly which documents to hone in our search on. Robert also made a point of noticeably yelling and screaming at me as much as he did everyone else, so that I would not be seen as his creature. He made a superb lightning rod. I did my part by acting harried and annoyed at my new job, and started muttering about quitting when I could afford to in a week or two, and started to get to know my rogues gallery of suspects. First at the top of the suspect list was Charles Blake, CEO, MBA, etc. He was a college crony of David Rollins and was brought in to be his assistant when David started taking over some of the daily operations of Eagle after his marriage to Eagle's daughter Sarah in 1986. The timing was certainly suspicious. His buddy marries the boss daughter, and then less than a year later, the boss dies in an odd plane crash. Buddy gets the company, and his friend gets instantly promoted into a fat executive position with an executive compensation package far above normal industry standards. Now, after David's equally suspicious death, he was in charge of everything, but like his predecessor, spent much of his time on the golf course at his exclusive country club. If anything bad was happening, it was happening during his watch. If fraud charges were going to be filed, the odds were that his name would be on top of the list. Next on my watch list was his own crony and school chum, Daniel Carson. He joined the company nearly immediately after Eagle's death to be their new CFO and head accountant, replacing a longtime employee who had been apparently invited to take early retirement. No bets that if any books had been cooked, this was the guy that had done them. It took just one glance into his office to tell that this guy really enjoyed the good life, and odds were he spent every dime of his legitimate salary and more besides. I had hired some outside investigators to work on a review of every one of my suspects' personal and family finances, but it was Daniel's that my fingers were itching to get a hold of first. Jessica Lee, also a college friend of our cast of rogues, was in theory the director of plant operations. But in the first week I was there, I never saw her once leave the corporate offices, let alone set any foot into the manufacturing and maintenance facilities. She lived on the telephone and didn't seem to use her computer or email much at all. I already had an excellent idea that her personal finances were a mess, particularly since our weekend investigations had revealed that she kept cocaine right in her top desk drawer and had a number of carelessly filed motel receipts for a notorious hot sheet no-tell motel on the far side of Greenville. She was apparently married to a non-Eagle employee, but had been notoriously unfaithful to him. It didn't take us long to discover that she had multiple affair partners, which primarily included her assistant, who actually did all of her real work for her, and even Charles occasionally. Her main paramour, it seemed, was Daniel, though, and they met twice a week at minimum for trysts. Her assistant, Brian, was a relatively new hire to the company and had been in no particular position of any authority until after David's death, and Jessica had promoted him far ahead of senior staff members, once again offering the incumbent early retirement to get him out of the way. I was starting already to see a pattern. The rumors and innuendo among the rank-and-file employees seemed spot on. Brian was just Jessica's pretty boy toy, and he in turn delegated all of his work to the plant department supervisors. He was certainly not the criminal mastermind we were looking for, but he could have been a useful tool. He certainly had maintenance access to the ill-fated prototype jet crash that claimed David's and 2 other lives. Linda Harper was a well-preserved and quite attractive lady in her late 30s, like me. She was the longtime executive secretary and had been with the company for about 15 years. In theory, she should know every single dirty secret of the company and know exactly where all of the bodies were buried. In practice, she wasn't very much help, but she showed a sincere interest in offering to help me any way she could. Technically, she was also now my administrative assistant as well. Linda didn't fit well as a good suspect for any of the mischief that was going on, largely because her late husband, James Harper, had been the chief of maintenance and was one of the 2 passengers in David's ill-fated flight. Every piece of scuttlebutt I obtained from the friends and co-workers of her late husband suggested that theirs had been a happy marriage. She often, after her day job, spent long evening hours with her husband with both of their heads in a disassembled aircraft engines, and had taken the sudden death of her spouse very badly indeed. There was no secret lover on the side, and she had no apparent motive, nor was there any financial benefit to his death. They each only had the minimum basic company-paid life insurance policies, as they were both relatively young. She had also remained an exceptionally long time in her period of mourning and still apparently had little or no interest in dating, let alone any thoughts of remarriage. Linda had a 19-year-old niece named Julie that came in once or twice a week to do some filing and other light office work for her. She was certainly not a suspect, except that I suspected every male in the company wanted to give her some filing of their own. Cute as a button and as pretty and perky as a late teenager can get, she wore extremely short skirts with only micro-thong panties and tight midriffs that displayed her flat stomach, dangling belly piercing, and most of her stamp tattoo on her lower back. She seemed to be a shameless exhibitionist and took great delight in bending over deeply at the waist to put files away in a lower drawer that constantly exposed most of her, but to everyone. She seemed very familiar and flirted shamelessly with both Charles and Daniel, but didn't go off on a nooner or lengthy trip to the supply room with either of them, at least on that particular day when I first saw her. But everyone was pretty busy that first Friday, and I suspected that the normal fun was on hold. The only other interesting character was an old assistant plant manager named Frank Williams, who wore a badge with employee number 3 on his old, torn, and greasy coveralls. He looked to be in his mid-70s and was accounted by all to be a delightful old coot. He had been Franklin's aircraft maintenance sergeant during the war and was one of the original founding members of the company. He was semi-retired but still seemed to be around at least 40 hours every week. His wife had already passed on, and his work was his home. It was no secret at all that management had wanted him gone for years, but when you are one of the founders of a company, you can often stick your tongue out at the young whippersnappers who now want to run things their way, and Frank did often. He couldn't be fired. He had a signed contract from Franklin guaranteeing lifetime employment, and he was darn determined to take it literally and die in the saddle. This was the real man who knew where all of the bodies were buried, but he wasn't ever going to talk around me. I heard 100 delightful stories of the old days, but any time I asked anything about recent events, he would get sly and evade my every question. No other sources stepped forward and volunteered anything to me. After the end of the workday on Friday, I started to sum up some of my early conclusions about the company, and at the very top of my list for item number 1, I wrote us versus them. The new management seemed to have nothing but contempt for the rank-and-file workers, many of them with over 20 years of company service. The employees, in return, hated every single member of their management and didn't trust any of them with so much as a burnt-out match. There was no communication, and every instruction or notification of a problem took at least 5 steps to move up and down the chain of command, usually taking days. Franklin had run the company personally for decades and knew every single employee and their spouses by their first name and probably all of their children's names as well. He spent far more time with his workers than he ever did behind his big desk. Since his death, management remained isolated in their ivory tower and didn't seem to care particularly what their employees were doing. As a result, there was no loyalty whatsoever between workers and management. Unannounced layoffs had been common, with longtime workers never hearing that they had been let go until they showed up for work the next day. Technically, I was viewed as part of the new management, and most lips were tightly sealed around me no matter how hard I tried to play the outsider. I definitely got the impression that Franklin's daughter Sarah still held much of the old loyalty, even though she was very much out of the management picture. I got the impression that while she controlled a considerable amount of the company's stock, she had lost out on a proxy fight to gain control of her father's company after the death of her husband, the shareholders preferring to keep the more experienced management team intact despite several years of poor financial performance. I did overhear an unguarded comment that suggested that Sarah and Linda were longtime close friends, but when I casually asked Linda if she knew Eagle's daughter well, and what was she like, she froze right up and would only state that they didn't talk much these days. No one came creeping up to me offering to share any of their pearls of wisdom or seemed likely to do so. That's okay. Tim was hinting that he had a lot of good news to offer at our next big conference call with him on Saturday. Some of my other hooks in the water were also starting to catch fish, some of them nice big ones, actually. The fun began late Friday evening when my cell phone went off during dinner. It was Tim reporting that a mysterious virus was suddenly hitting most of the computers and servers in the company, an especially nasty one that usually permanently wiped out most hard drive data, even when cleaned by an IT professional. Our hidden cameras in a few strategic places also revealed that it was Daniel Carson, Jessica Lee, and their useful idiot Brian hand installing this virus on every management computer in the building from floppy disks. Daniel could also be clearly seen with a big magnet degaussing most of the old server backup tapes so that they would have errors when used to restore the lost company data. Sorry, Daniel, just a bit too late for that. This had been an event that we had planned for and often seemed to happen at suspect companies just before the expected arrival of auditors. And frankly, it didn't hurt any of our activities in the slightest. We had all of the before information that we needed and a week's worth of the after changes and deletions that probably covered 99 of all of the sensitive documents that we had been tracking. Friday night had one other event worthy of note. Linda had stopped by to visit me at the BB, spiffed up for the night, and like her niece, was showing off to me a fair amount of interesting cleavage and nice soft thighs. Sitting at a small local bar down the street, we hoisted a few and each of us began, in an increasingly unsettling manner, to pump the other one for information. She was a smart girl, she said, and knew that I did not fit in with either the corporate management or the current court-ordered bankruptcy management. I was something else, but what? I played it as vague as I could and said I could indeed prove that Robert Lacey was my boss and sign my paycheck. But this didn't fool her a bit, and she soon itemized all of the real likely suspects. Out with it. Who do you really work for? The bankruptcy court? The county DA's office? The attorney general's office? The feds? Or the fraud squad? The fact that I couldn't come up with any convincing alternatives pretty much sealed it in her mind for all of the above. She made a fairly clumsy seduction attempt to get me into bed and hopefully get more answers during pillow talk. But fortunately, she was indeed quite out of practice with the whole modern dating game. I begged off with a real bad headache from all of Robert's screaming today, and made my escape before I could talk myself into getting a better look at her body. Her dress must have been magnificent. Several things about my various conversations with Linda were beginning to bother me, and I made a last-minute phone call that night about arranging another conventional wiretap or two to our existing list and getting an immediate copy of her cell phone records. She was definitely suspicious and fishing for information, but I didn't think it was for just herself. I wanted to find out fast who really had her loyalties and who she was trying to protect. Saturday, we had our long-awaited major conference call with all of my teammates huddled together. It had been a very productive week for everyone, and it was obvious that 98% of our work was already done and that the state, local, and even federal attorneys would soon be very busy and for a good long while. It would be impossible to give proper coverage to the wild events of our 4.5-hour-long meeting as each player laid their cards out on the table, but I could quickly summarize most of the gory details in just a few bullet points. The CEO, Charles Blake, was a clueless idiot, and while he had not actively participated in any of the schemes to defraud the company, he had signed his name onto an awful lot of fraudulent financial documents. He lived within the means of his salary, but would probably lose most of his assets when sued for corporate mismanagement of a clear and blatant kind. He wouldn't go to jail probably, but the bankruptcy estate could easily recoup several $1 million here with civil lawsuits. Daniel Carson and Jessica Lee, along with their flunky Brian, had been involved in actively defrauding Eagle even before Franklin Eagle's death. I had true financial records now that I could compare with their fabricated ones. The extent of the theft was mind-boggling, over $30 million in the 1990s alone. We had the names and accounts from the caches of their web browsers to their hidden bank accounts, and this provided ample proof of numerous fraudulent interstate and international financial transfers. These folks weren't going to get a slap on the hand at Club Federal. At least 2 of them seemed headed for some major penitentiary time, not to mention the financial recovery of the stolen assets. My every day and evening would be busy for the next month, precisely documenting where every cent was stolen from and how it was done. A piece of cake, but it would be a lot of paperwork. With the current decline of the company and imminent bankruptcy, there was much less to siphon off these days, but our fraudsters found new ways of generating revenue for themselves. In particular, they had friendly handshake deals with at least 2 of Eagle's primary civilian and military project competitors to keep Eagle products out of certain competitive bids for lucrative government and military contracts during the last 5 years. In addition, there was a lovely email paper trail of documented payments from both competitors, totaling $4 million cash to Daniel as a reward for steering Eagle in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy, with a promise of another $8 million each once the official and final court-ordered closure was announced. This nice little piece of blatant interstate fraud greatly interested our Fed players and promised huge possible civil settlements to Eagle as a result. The murder investigations were not quite as cut and dried. All of the early evidence pointed to Daniel and Jessica as the culprits for Franklin Eagle's death, but there was no smoking gun. We now had expert independent crash investigators with full aviation forensic teams on the site of both crashes, but we couldn't expect a miracle or a smoking gun at this very late stage. A successful prosecution seemed doubtful unless we could get either Daniel or Jessica to confess or rat out each other in return for reduced charges. Possible, but not 100% guaranteed. David's murder still seemed a complete mystery. He was a willing participant in the frauds, thus giving Daniel and Jessica motive to remove one of their partners and thus gain a much bigger share of the loot, but it didn't quite fit snugly. Their emails from this period suggested that they privately thought to each other it was probably just an accident and just blessed their good fortune. Linda did not seem to be involved in any way with any of the fraudulent activities, but we now discovered her secret mistress that she was doing her own private snooping for Sarah Eagle. They were phoning each other and having long conversations nightly, it seemed. Sarah herself seemed to be 100 in the clear, but she was now being examined under the Fed and state legal microscope just on principle. Despite owning about 40 of the company's shares, she had absolutely nothing to do with its management and had apparently been working behind the scenes to organize a shareholders' revolt to throw out the corrupt mismanagement the company had suffered under since her father's death. She was still considered a very possible suspect for the crash that killed her husband, as it was common knowledge that the 2 of them did not get along well. David was a noted philanderer, and before his death, there were strong rumors that divorce would soon be in the works, and she wasted little time afterward in retaking her maiden name. Together, we compiled some lengthy lists of former longtime employees that had been encouraged to leave in the last few years, but several of the key ones we most especially wanted to speak with had seemingly disappeared off the face of the earth, and it would take time to locate and question them. We were certain that these witnesses could help fill in any holes in our investigation. That summed up the entire meeting pretty nicely. The Fed and state folks had plenty now to start their own grinding investigations, and I had given Judge Harold Benson enough info to allow him to move the bankruptcy into reorganization rather than just strictly asset liquidation if he was so inclined. It was decided to keep the operation going for at least another week and maybe two, just to glean a bit more information and maybe hopefully gain more incriminating information against our suspects. They were all going to be watched with a close eye and flags kept on their financial accounts. Even if they decided to run, they wouldn't have a cent of their ill-gotten funds to do it with. Feeling quite virtuous and not ready for a long night of analyzing and contrasting the true and fraudulent financial statements yet, I headed downstairs to see if there was any chance of a late dinner. There wasn't, but I was referred to a nice local diner down the street that stayed open late on Saturday nights, where I found both a great meal and discovered that someone had followed me there from the BB. I leisurely finished my dinner and lingered long over dessert and coffee, and my watcher seemed to do the same. To remove any doubt of coincidence, I then went to a local watering hole and watched the last few innings of the New Hampshire Wildcats baseball game while nursing a beer or two, and sure enough, my follower soon joined me. As stalkers go, she wasn't at all bad-looking. She seemed to be a very decorative gal in her early 30s who hadn't skimped one little bit on her regularly scheduled maintenance. She had long, gorgeous chestnut hair that she was now making sure was kept quite away from the front of her revealing dress, and she seemed to be nursing a few drinks of her own while debating over something in her mind. She appeared to be a stranger, but was definitely not cruising for action because she politely declined every male that approached to offer and buy her a drink. She was waiting on someone or something, and I guessed it was me. I gathered my own nerves together, thought out a quick game plan, and abandoned the Wildcats to their inevitable losing fate and walked over next to her. I ordered another beer from the bartender, but this was just to give her the opportunity to speak to me first since I was standing right next to her. It worked because she took a deep breath herself and introduced herself as Megan, and said she could use a rum and Coke refill if I was inclined to buy a lady a drink, and she would be more than happy to repay this generous gesture with some conversation. I cheerfully accepted her offer, and we moved to the farther corner from the television set to talk. I knew exactly who she was. I had seen a photo of her earlier, but I was going to let her play out her game for now. We made a lot of small talk, and I kept to my cover story about just being here locally very temporarily to help with some financials over at Eagle. She mentioned that she lived mostly out of town now, but was back visiting a friend or two in the area, and she mentioned that she used to have several family friends who worked at Eagle. Really? I said, and she offhandedly mentioned a few names. One of them was William Harris, the former director of Plan Operations before Jessica. We very much wanted to talk to him badly, and I hinted as boldly as I dared that ID heard a great number of interesting stories about him, and ID loved to take him to dinner or out for a drink sometime. Megan shied away a bit at this, but vaguely hinted she could look at some old Christmas cards to see if she had an address. The next 2 hours were spent in casual but increasingly engaging conversation. She was a delight to converse with and had the rare art of being able to freely speak exactly what was on her mind, mincing no words but still being humorous, polite, and always ladylike. I enjoyed every minute I spent with her, and when I mentioned at last that I thought I needed to get back to the BB for the night, she dithered but for just a moment, and then, looking me right in the eyes, asked if I was in the mood for some company tonight and maybe a bit more conversation in the morning. I smiled and gave her a gentle kiss on the lips, which she did not shy from in the slightest, and asked her to wait for me just a moment while I visited the men's room. The beers were feeling a need to be recycled, but I had time for a quick cell phone call at the same time. "Judge, I hope I woke you up for a change. This is Mike." Hooray. I had woken him up in the middle of the night for once. I'm in Greenville still, of course, but I'm less than 5 minutes away from having a really close chat with Sarah Eagle in bed tonight, unless you can give me a very, very good reason not to. He stammered and hemmed a bit for a few moments and decided that no legal conflict of interest would probably occur. I was hired to obtain Eagle financials, not to most thoroughly investigate the former Mrs. Rollins. No problem, and give her a good hug for me also, he decided, and bid me a good night, chuckling as he hung up the phone. The lovely Sarah Eagle was waiting for me eagerly at the bar, and we did a great many pleasant and delightful things to each other that night, and well into the late hours of the morning. Around noon the next morning, we were still snuggled happily in bed with each other. She snuggled up to my chest, and I dropped my bombshell. Sarah, I have enjoyed every minute of our time together, but isn't it about time you started to play straight with me? I have absolutely no intentions of kicking you out of this bed. And as far as I'm concerned, we can stay right here the rest of this weekend, but after you tell me what you really want from me. She didn't seem so surprised at all and rubbed her chin a bit more against my chest and hugged me a bit closer before she said, Linda said you were a very smart cookie, much too smart to be hanging around anyone at Eagle for any reason other than your own. When did you realize who I was? Nearly immediately when you were watching me at Joe's Diner, and I knew for a fact the moment you walked into the bar. It's okay. Judge Benson says we're perfect for each other. I told her with a laugh that she returned, and we shared a kiss and started to collectively spill our guts out to each other. I gave her most of my true job description, that I was there on behalf of several different agencies to investigate the current management for fraud, and I felt that the odds were excellent for the conviction of those unnamed perpetrators. She, in turn, mentioned that while she did have an old address for William Harris, employee number 2 and co-founder of Eagle, she didn't think it was current but knew who did have it. She reached for her purse from the bedside stand and, taking out her cell phone, dialed a number from its memory, and she held the speaker near my ear so I could hear everything that was said. Frank, hi, this is Sarah. Ollie, this is extremely important that you do what I say and do this one last favor for me and for Dad. You've met Mike, the new guy over at corporate. He is with me, and you can trust him completely. He needs to know exactly where William Harris is now. I think he's somewhere in Texas, but I'm not sure where. It's important, very important, that Mike gets to talk to William. Can you do that for me? Great. I love and miss you too, and we'll hopefully meet for lunch again soon. With that, she hung up. Ollie was very willing to do anything for Miss Sarah and promised his full cooperation and agreed to meet me early Monday morning in the manufacturing area break room. We managed to stay dressed long enough to go back to Joe's Diner and have an excellent lunch together, and we discussed financial matters for nearly the entire meal, then went back up to my room to supposedly review an especially odd financial statement from the spring quarter of 1990, when we got somewhat distracted and ended up back in bed again, and for the rest of the afternoon and long, long evening. I ended up being quite exhausted after the multiple sessions in one calendar day, even when I was a much younger and friskier chap in my early 20s and in my own first unsuccessful marriage. Sarah had very firm ideas otherwise and was determined that she'd soon get me back in a proper fighting trim, and at the very least coax a final week number 7 out of me. To my amazement, around midnight, she did and received one last final taste of me before we parted in the morning. We did have a brief final interlude at some outrageous early hour of the morning when the phone rang with my wake-up call, but she wanted me to kiss her during her long drive back to her current home near Dover along New Hampshire's tiny stretch of coastline. We said our goodbyes for now right after breakfast downstairs, as it was time for me to go and meet Frank, but she left me with 2 final sincere confessions as we embraced and kissed one last time before we got into our cars. I know exactly who killed my father, but it's too late for you or any other judge to punish him here. I know that my ex-husband was responsible. Daddy had wanted to ease into retirement just a little bit and stop handling most of the routine company stuff and let David handle those things, but he soon regretted it. David and I were about to divorce, and Daddy soon figured out that he and his friends were up to something irregular and were siphoning money from the company almost from the moment they had gotten here. He was flying to New York when his plane crashed to speak with our largest minority shareholder and to petition for an emergency shareholders meeting to fire all of the new company management. David was going to be fired, and his thieving friends all tossed to the curb and hopefully into prison. I've got 2 written statements from mechanics who swore they saw David near his plane the morning of his last flight, despite his claims that he was on business in Portsmouth that day. In any case, it's now too late. I couldn't divorce David after that. It would cost me half of my father's shares of the company. I couldn't prove any fraud. And even if I could prove he was a lying, cheating skunk of a man, the shareholders would still re-vote him back to continue to destroy everything my father worked so hard for. While married, I at least had a tiny little control over him, and we separated to live in different cities until his death. I don't know who killed him, really. I don't. But William Harris says he thinks he knows, but he can't prove it. And he told me once at the time that I didn't really want to know who did it anyway, because it would just hurt me something awful and nothing good would come from its disclosure anyway. This gave me a lot to think about on the short drive to the factory. Ollie seemed to be determined to give my overstuffed head even more to think about. He took me to a mostly unused office in a semi-abandoned part of the fabrications building and noted with a laugh that the only other person who used this room was Linda's frisky niece. Apparently, she had quite an active social life for her irregular working days and could usually manage to handle intimate relations with 3 to 5 different men each visit, although not usually all at the same time. He then offered me some considerably more useful advice. He knew where management stashed their paperwork that was too sensitive to leave around the office, but was too important to burn or shred, and he gave me the name and room number of the storage facility. He also gave me William Harris' most recent address and phone number. William had started up his own little aviation maintenance company at an old abandoned World War era airstrip along the South Texas coast, right near a town called Lubbock. The facility also acted as the only county airfield for at least 50 miles in any direction, and it was possible to get a local Skyhopper Airlines charter from Houston to Lubbock fairly easily. He said he would give a call to old William first to get him good and primed to talk before speaking to me. I called the judge right afterward, gave him the address to send the local sheriff with a warrant to seize the hidden corporate files, and I got the okay to fly down to Texas for a day or two. I then promised, with Sarah now out of my bed, I would crack down on my duties and start getting the final financial reports into his office via Speedy Express when your package absolutely and positively has to be there yesterday. For the rest of the week, I was as good as my word, and my final investigative reports for the years 1986 to 1994 were complete, leaving only 1995 to the first quarter of 1997 left to be done. As those were relatively lean years with relatively little, if any, real profit to be embezzled, I didn't anticipate that these would take me long to do after my return. Friday morning, I was on the red-eye from Concord to New York, and then on another flight to Houston. Frank wasn't kidding. The chartered single-engine flight to Lubbock him certain never missed scraping the tops of trees by very much. I found a Lubbock cab. They only have 3 who was willing to make the 20-mile drive out of town to come get me. And the driver knew exactly where to find William Harris on a Friday night, and took me right to William's favorite watering hole on the outskirts of Lubbock and right on the beach, a glorious establishment called Phil's Cantina and Ice House. William Harris frankly wasn't delighted to see me, but seemed resigned to his fate. And while he did not volunteer a single scrap of information, he freely and honestly answered every direct question I put to him. We ended up talking at the beach sidebar until after 10 p.m., but we both kept getting quite distracted by the lovely and often very naked young ladies that alternated between drinking at the bar and going for a quick swim with their boyfriends or girlfriends. Lubbock, William explained to me, was an odd sort of place that seemed both at once utterly alien and as familiar as if it were your birth hometown. He had received a settlement from the New Eagle management to take early retirement at the ripe young age of 67 or so, and he had moved down here to become the chief of maintenance for the local Lubbock County field. Technically and legally, the airfield was in Harris County, right next to the border with Refugio County, but everyone preferred to think that Lubbock was their home. Surprising, considering that Lubbock County is only about 30 miles in total diameter. I suppose they had their reasons, but it seemed pretty strange to me. He had expanded their business quite a bit, and the company was now doing some contract repairs for other county airfields and even some of the closer municipal airports such as Corpus Christi and Victoria. He offered me a spare bedroom for the night, and we made plans in the morning for him to show me around the old military field with its old vintage hangars and dilapidated facilities. The land here, as I found out, was dirt cheap, and the county taxes were next to nothing. The entire region was desperate to promote any kind of business growth, and I had to laugh hysterically when I heard that the #1 source of revenue for Lubbock County was actually its large nudist colony, one of the country's largest, that attracted nearby city folks in the summer and the snowbirds in the winter for year-round sun and fun on the beach. A local computer software company was starting to become fairly rich and famous, but the new tourism industry still brought in more dollars than even the local ranching and farming did. Unemployment in the area was high, very high, among local young men and women fresh out of high school, and they usually had to find jobs elsewhere in a larger, more economically successful city. A kernel of an idea started to grow, and the more I thought about it, the more viable it sounded. I would certainly have a lot to think about on the long flight home Sunday. Saturday afternoon, William and I had a very long talk in his dining room, and he gave me consent to record the conversation as a semi-deposition for the bankruptcy court. Yes, he had strongly suspected that a considerable amount of fraud was taking place, especially and specifically regarding bogus purchasing invoices for materials that never existed. He provided numerous examples of this and also provided info on a new scam that I had not yet discovered involving payroll and benefits payments made to non-existent employees for many years. In fact, for much of the early 1990s, Eagle was claiming total payroll costs that were probably at least double their actual real costs. Again, William had documentation to support this. He seemed to be an extremely careful man who crossed every T and dotted every I and double-checked everything afterward to make certain he would make an outstanding witness if necessary at the various fraud trials that were soon to come. "Why did I take their 30 pieces of silver and leave?" he said with a laugh. Old Franklin was dead and buried, and his daughter outmaneuvered in a shareholders' battle. The barbarians were already well past the gates and were checking out our good silver, drinking our best wine, and pinching the butts of our daughters to see which would make the best assault. Eagle was done for. It was just a matter of time. Franklin would have wanted me to at least have salvaged what I could get so I could make a new start elsewhere. Did I regret leaving Sarah alone among the wolves? Not really. She was pretty much already on her own, and she was away safe from her husband and his gang of 4. She would survive, and if anyone could later pick up the pieces, it would be her. She is very much just like her dad. If she called me on the phone tomorrow, I'd sell my house and everything I own to bail her out of a jam. I had to change my hour-long cassette tapes 4 times before his wealth of inside company info began to peter out. Who had killed Franklin? David, period. End of discussion. He had absolutely no doubt in his mind whatsoever. Franklin was going to kick his butt out of the company and out of his daughter's life if it was the last thing he did, William assured me. The last words he spoke to me before he stepped into his plane to fly to New York were, "William, when I get back, that smug, sneaking scumsucker and his idiot sidekicks are going to be on their way to prison, and we can get things a bit back to normal around here." William was sure that Franklin had a thick brown leather briefcase with him full of documentation of various illegal doings for the other major shareholders to see. Who had killed David? Linda's husband, James, and young Charlie Neal, who had been the head avionics instrumentation technician. William thought he knew, but really didn't want to specifically answer. It wouldn't do anyone a bit of good today, even if the entire truth came out, he said, and added the cryptic comment he or she didn't mean for it to happen anyway, and they've already been punished enough already, and the truth would break Sarah's heart. I persisted and at length dialed Sarah's cell phone number, and after reaching her, I explained the dilemma. I then handed my phone to William, and he took it into the kitchen for a long, semi-private discussion with her that lasted at least 10 minutes before he returned my phone to me. Sarah says for me to tell you everything I know, and her feelings and consequences be damned. Her exact words. She also said for me to tell you she loves you and to hurry back home. The judge is getting antsy. He then sat down next to me and gave me his best military veteran hard stare in the face. And for a 75-year-old man, it was a damn good one. "Son, I've known that gal all of her life, and as a baby, she pissed in my lap more times than I could count. The only reason I didn't kill the rat scumsucker myself after he murdered her dad was because she begged me not to on her knees in front of me. Franklin would not have wanted his partner and best friend to spend his final years in jail just to avenge him. The thieves wanted money? Fine. It was just money, and money was replaceable, but the happiness of the last years of my life was not. She insisted she was right. She nearly always was. The only mistake she ever made in her life was to marry that rat scumsucker David, and I think that was just because her daddy kept pushing hard at her that he wanted grandchildren to spoil for his retirement. David was a handsome MBA student, plenty smart, and seemed like a good fit for the family business at the time. Now you, on the other hand, I've only known for about one day. And while I think I like you, if I even suspect that one day you will bring a single tear of unhappiness to her face, me and a cohort of XET friends are going to come pay you a late-night visit and suddenly and quite violently correct your attitude all over your front lawn. Do we have any misunderstandings about this? I assured him that we did not. And after a round of beers were opened up, he opened his long-closed memories about David's death. The very first thing that you need to know about that tragic plane crash was that Linda's husband, James, and poor Charlie were not supposed to have been on that plane flight. David, who wasn't one-tenth the pilot that Franklin had been, was scheduled to take our new prototype of a 10-seat small commercial transport jet that we were getting the final kinks out of up for a short 15-minute test just to review some final instrument configurations before we started production. Really, nothing more exotic than a few Tachangos around the airfield. David, at the very last minute, got pissed over a switch that was giving a bogus fault reading, and he ordered James and Charlie up in the plane with him for that short test flight. As I said, David wasn't that hot of a pilot and had the wrong stuff in spades. He mishandled a minor fuel irregularity and put the plane into a stall. Old Franklin wouldn't have blinked an eye and would have reset the engine to run solely off of the secondary fuel intake and wouldn't have lost 10 feet of altitude in the process. Poor dumb David augers right into the side of a mountain and takes two good people with him. The other thing that you also need to know is that Linda and Franklin were pretty close starting from the time Linda and Sarah were still in college together. If I had any misunderstanding about what he meant, it disappeared when William took his right index finger and inserted it into an O he had made with his left fist. Franklin missed his late wife, who had died a few years earlier, and Linda was apparently very willing to oblige his needs and didn't mind their age difference. They never got serious, but even after she had married James, she still kept Franklin company on occasion. I think James knew all about it, but he was willing to share her. I hear that she has a hotto-trot niece called Julie working with her now that keeps a lot of the young and not-so-young studs happy on the job. That's exactly the way young Linda was when she came to work for us then, but Linda was loyal to a fault to both Sarah and Franklin. He continued, she took Franklin's death hard, and even though she had channeled most of her love and affection to just her husband, James, it still gnawed at her. Everyone knew that it was David that had done it, but no one could prove a damn thing. As each annual shareholders meeting came and went, David's control of Franklin's company seemed to get stronger, and Sarah was left further and further on the outside. Another thing you might want to know is that Sarah and Linda were apparently very close in college and remained occasional lovers afterward. Yes, I said lovers. They do that sort of thing down here in Lubbock, and no one blinks twice about it. Even now in my old age, I admit it's fun to watch women lovers on the beach or in the clubs here. Heck, you can even see ladies kissing each other and comparing their bodies openly in the grocery store here. But in old Puritan New England, that was some pretty bold stuff even for the 1980s and early 90s, and they kept their affair to themselves and didn't advertise that they had more than a passing acquaintance with each other's naked bodies when the lights were off. Apparently, one day, Sarah cried a bit too long and hard about David's intolerable behavior towards her and his destruction of their once thriving family business to her close girlfriend, Linda, and Linda decided that enough was enough and decided to do something about it. Linda was a good technician, as she and James had taken apart and rebuilt many a jet engine together. It was nothing to her to tweak a fuel valve just a little bit so that it wouldn't flow quite correctly and would soon jam in flight. Any pilot worth his salt could have fixed the problem in the air, but David panicked, and the man she loved died, as well as the man she hated for killing one of her lovers and ruining the life of another. She had just wanted to teach him a little lesson in humility. She cried to me when I went to comfort her after the crash. She just wanted to scare him a little bit. She knew he'd panic at the problem, but it shouldn't have caused the plane to crash. 2 innocent people had died because of her mistake. She confessed everything to me, and I knew that the truth would hurt Sarah badly, so we kept it our secret. This was the real main reason that I left the company soon afterward. I think Sarah knows the truth in her heart. Linda became very distant from everyone after James' death, and no one thought twice about it. James was a good man, and she was very obviously in mourning for him. But Linda also pushed Sarah as far away from her as she could manage. She had accidentally caused the death of her lover's husband and her own husband, and wanted under no circumstances for Sarah to ever be blamed for this act. Does Linda deserve to be punished? Maybe for the accidental death of James and Charlie. But no one is left alive today to press charges, and I think Sarah was already hurt enough by life already. I called the judge that night to relate William's full account to him and to suggest that all of our investigating was now pretty much done. I could finish my final financial analysis within a week and send the last reports to his desk. Afterward, I could catch a return flight back to New Hampshire on Sunday. I did enjoy Lubbock and thought I could be very comfortable living there permanently. I also made 2 other cell phone calls that night. The first was to Sarah, who cried a lot and wouldn't come back to the phone for nearly 30 minutes. Then I called Linda and asked if she would like to come out here and join me. This was something that I had been thinking about a lot during the last week or two, and while I didn't feel quite yet ready to settle down permanently and take another bite of the marriage apple, Linda was exactly the sort of gal that could get me to reconsider that. She agreed at once and started packing her bags that night and booked herself a flight to Lubbock that next Monday. Monday afternoon, I kissed Sarah one last time goodbye as we got into our cars, but we didn't part without making future plans for seeing each other. She'd be in Lubbock in a few weeks herself for a visit, but not to stay for good. She was already getting involved with a co-investor in Eagle, who was arranging the financing necessary to buy out all of the current shareholders and take the company private. Together, she had already begun assembling a new management team to restore Eagle to its past glory, and Judge Benson and the bankruptcy court both eagerly approved of this plan. He had already decided to keep the reorganization of Eagle running for at least the next 6 months, giving Sarah a chance to get the right folks back in charge. I was confident that my initial efforts to begin the bankruptcy cleanup for her would be quickly forgotten. There was only one other thing left for me to do once I returned to Lubbock. I had bought a large Winnebago in advance to use as a temporary trailer home, but that soon changed when Linda arrived and began to make herself comfortable. We both agreed that we wanted to spend the rest of our lives together in peace and quiet in a warm place, and I felt pretty sure that I had made the right choice to live down here in Lubbock with her. Linda is pregnant and is due to give birth sometime around August. As much as I miss New Hampshire, the land here is fertile and the air clean and dry, just what we need for our new life together. We both worked hard for this, and we both agreed that this is where we want to live forever, side by side with each other. Will justice ever truly be served, or are some secrets better left buried? As the truth unfolds in this tangled web of betrayal, fraud, and revenge, what would you have done differently? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more gripping stories just like this. Did you know that high school romances usually last about 3 weeks? Well, Amanda Brown and Robert Carter broke that record by about 30 years. They met when she was just a freshman, and he was a sophomore, and from that moment on, they were inseparable. They had that true mythical love that seems to stand the test of time. I thought we were really happy. Our marriage was satisfying, and when Amanda gave birth to our daughter, Olivia, it brought us even closer. I was a content person during those years. Let me introduce myself to bring you up to speed on this story. I'm John Taylor, and Amanda is my wife for the last 24 years. As I mentioned earlier, Amanda and Robert dated throughout high school, and yes, she did lose her virginity to Robert. We know that all high school romances end eventually, but in this case, it was more like a temporary break. Since Robert was a year older than Amanda, he decided to make a lot of money after high school so he could marry her. That's what my wife says, and she said it often throughout our marriage. After graduating from high school, Robert went to work on an oil rig in Texas with his uncle, and that's where the trouble started. It appears that Robert stopped writing shortly after landing there, leaving Amanda alone during her senior year. She eventually started dating some guy named Greg or Gary or something, but it wasn't serious since her heart still belonged to her one and only Robert. Amanda waited like an obedient girlfriend, but Robert was absent and not very sociable. Apparently, Robert really enjoyed working on the rig and began a rather nomadic life, believing that his dear Amanda was still waiting for him to be rich and embrace her upon his return. Well, that certainly didn't happen. The reality of life is that everything goes on as usual and nothing ever stays the same. This was true for Amanda when she went to college, got her degree, and met me at a party when she was 23. I was a little older than her at 28, but we made a good couple. I fell in love with her the moment I met her and thought she did the same to me. Our marriage was quite normal, and the only hiccup during our relationship was that 2 days before our wedding ceremony, a letter arrived from Robert. Just like the prodigal son, he was finally returning home and wanted her to meet him. Thank God that Amanda's mother dissuaded her from returning to him, saying that she had a new life waiting for her and she shouldn't waste her time on that jerk, as she called him. After several intense, emotional moments during which I worried that she was actually going to call off the wedding, Amanda finally went through with the ceremony, becoming my wife, Mrs. Amanda Taylor. When Robert finally showed up, it was too late as Amanda and I were already on our honeymoon. Robert, in a fit of despondency, apparently enlisted in the Navy. After our honeymoon, we settled into our new lives, Amanda as a nurse and me as a financial consultant for a large investment firm. The job is certainly not glamorous, but it is stable and pays the bills. My marriage was strong, but there was just one tiny hiccup that kept repeating itself. Robert began texting Amanda, and she happily responded to him. When I asked her if this was necessary, she became indignant and said, "Oh, John, don't be jealous. He's an old friend of mine who's single and in the Navy, and I'm just writing to keep his spirits up." Well, I can't plead ignorance since I knew that he wrote to her regularly, and I also knew that she wrote back to him regularly. Neither her family nor I could convince her to stop writing until she received a letter saying that he had married a girl where he was stationed. This stopped the correspondence, and my peace of mind returned. Over the next 3 years, I think she got 3 Christmas cards from Robert, and that was it. During this break in correspondence with Robert, our daughter Olivia was born. With our baby in hand, Amanda and I came together like a team of mules and worked hard to build a house and farm so Olivia could have a good life. Yes, life was good in those days, and we both worked together to raise and care for our child. But as always happens, something comes along to spoil it. One day, Amanda received a letter from Robert. She never talked about it, but I noticed that our stamp consumption started to increase after that. I concluded that she was writing to Robert again, but I ignored it. After all, he was out there making the world safe for democracy, and I was here keeping my family's world safe. If they wanted to write to each other, that was really their business, no matter how I felt about it. Eventually, Amanda started sharing with me some of the information she had gotten from Robert. He divorced his first wife, but now had another. He saw battle and was apparently highly decorated. I listened with half an ear, but Amanda spoke with pride for her Navy man. I corrected her by saying that he would be upset if they called him a soldier since he was a sailor. Amanda giggled sweetly and said, "Oh, I think I better watch this." Watching her talk about him really depressed me, but I hoped that someday she would finally forget about him and focus on her family. Well, she never did. Robert had served in the Navy for 30 years, been married and divorced 3 times, and now had enough medals to make General Patton jealous. I realized with horror that while Robert had become more charming to my wife over the years, I had only grown older and more predictable. My only hope was that Robert, when he was discharged from the Navy, would live somewhere far away from us. Unfortunately, he didn't, and that's where we are now. Olivia, our daughter, is grown up and now married to a great guy named David Wilson. Another great news is that they are expecting their first child. I am now 54, and I'm looking forward to the magical number 60 so I can retire and spend my last few years in peace and tranquility. Amanda still looks great and could still make my heart skip a beat. Little did I know that the peace of my life would soon be a thing of the past. It was Thursday when I returned home to find Amanda dressed to the nines, telling me we had a dinner reservation at 7. At first, I thought I had memory loss and missed an anniversary or birthday, but after doing a few quick calculations, I realized that wasn't the case. Well, I played along and went to our bedroom to clean myself up and try to look in about the same league as Amanda. Dinner was excellent, and the restaurant was packed, which made me think Amanda had something else on her mind other than just good food. Towards the end of our meal, I looked at her and stated, "Okay, now you can drop the bomb. I'm in a good mood and won't make a scene. One of my quirks is that I will never get angry in public. Working for a financial firm, you never lose your cool where it shows, and that kind of spilled over into my personal life." Amanda knew this, and over the years, whenever she had something to say that she thought would upset me, she would simply take me out into a public place to break the news. Tonight, I felt it was bad just by looking at her face. 24 years together, and you learn how to read your soulmate. I had bad feelings all over the board tonight, and I just knew it was going to ruin my night. Finally, with trepidation, she delivered the bad news. John, I think you should know that Robert is back. I suddenly felt nauseous, but I was sure that it was not the quality of the food I had just eaten. I stared at her for a few moments, waiting for the other shoe to drop, but Amanda just looked at me thoughtfully. Finally, I broke the awkward silence. When you say back, do you mean on vacation? She shook her head from side to side and said very quietly, no, John. He's not on vacation. He was discharged from the Navy and bought a house 2 streets away from us. With that, my panic level began to rise, and I quickly interjected, and he's going to live there with his, third wife? Again, she said quietly, no, he got divorced again, but this time he had to lose part of his pension because of her. I tried to suppress my anger, but couldn't, and said crap too loudly. Some of the visitors sitting next to us looked at me in surprise. My swearing wasn't because Robert had lost part of his pension to his ex, but because he had moved closer to us, and I needed to know his motivation for doing so. I became more active. Amanda, you haven't met Robert, have you? The expression on her face succinctly answered my question. She didn't even answer when I asked her my next question. When and how, Amanda? She also looked a little depressed when she answered. Yesterday, he stopped by our house to tell me that we are now neighbors. My heart was beating like crazy, and I continued the interrogation, very afraid of what I might find out. Did you sleep with him, Amanda? Once again, her face spoke volumes before she blurted out, I did it, John, but it's not what you think. I looked deep into her eyes and almost growled, I think, Amanda, that my faithful wife slept with someone other than her husband. Now explain to me why this is not what I think it is. I did it because he needed me, John. When he came up to me, he looked so lost. He's going through some anxiety or something about a divorce, and he needed me badly, so I tried to help him. I love you, John, but I realize I still love Robert too. Well, that's it. My wife slept with Robert, and he used PTSD and divorce as his ticket back into Amanda's heart and into her bedroom. I looked her straight in the eyes and spoke as decisively as I had ever spoken to her in our entire marriage. Okay, Amanda, the damage is done. We can get through this and get our lives back, but you can never sleep with him again. Do you understand me? She looked at me with tears in her eyes and said quietly, but decisively, I can't promise that, John. I love him, and he needs me even more than you. I was shocked to hear these words from her lips, but was aware of the fact that a public restaurant is not the place to air our dirty laundry. I called the waiter and asked for the bill. 10 minutes later, we were in the car and heading home when I pressed it again. Amanda, how can you sleep with him knowing that you have a husband? Have you forgotten those vows we made together almost 24 years ago? Do you remember the part about abandoning all the others? Now she began to cry openly and between sobs blurted out, I'm sorry, John, but he needs me, and we found each other again. I can't bear the thought of losing him or you. I was stumped as to what I could do or say that would make her give him up. With a hint of anger in my voice, I said loudly, well then, what do you suggest? Do we alternate days off? He gets you for New Year's, and I get you for Christmas? Stop it, Amanda. You can't have 2 men. She stopped sniffling and looked at me with a strange expression on her face. How about a vacation, John? Now it was my turn to be embarrassed. What the hell are you talking about, Amanda? She moved on to another topic. Listen, John, remember about 15 years ago when you took a year off to go back to school and get your master's degree? Well, you took it, did what needed to be done, and then returned to your previous position, and everything was fine. I shook my head irritably. Amanda, how can you equate me getting a degree that benefited the company and my family with your involvement with this jerk that only benefits the two of you? At this point, I pulled into my driveway and turned off the engine. Amanda reached out and lovingly touched my face, saying her plea. John, I missed my last year of high school with Robert, and if I had had that year, we might not be facing the situation we are in tonight. Give me this year, and you and I will get rid of Robert, and I promise you that I will be the best wife I can be to you. I need this time, John, please. I was sad, hurt, shocked, and depressed. I wanted to take Amanda's neck with my hands and press until her eyes went dark, but then I remembered all these stories about prison and how cuckolded husbands lose their freedom and property. After turning it all over in my head, I said, okay, Amanda, if this is what you want, you just go and do what you like, and this is a big but, don't ask me to sanction this. And just to be clear, I don't want to see or hear from you in any capacity for the entire year. Is it clear? And know that in a year, you may have no one to return to. I hope that the draconian parameters I had put in place for her vacation might just dampen her enthusiasm. But it was no use. She didn't seem to hear a word I said after okay. She reached out and kissed me on the cheek, saying only, okay, thank you, John. You will see. You won't regret it. I shook my head and said, it's too late. I already regret it. That night, she wanted to make love to me, but I just ignored her. The thought of her with Robert made me feel sick, and I didn't want to be physically intimate with her. As we were getting ready for bed, I grabbed a pillow and told her I was sleeping in the guest room. I saw that this really hurt her, and I was glad because maybe now she would reconsider what this vacation would lead to. The next morning, I woke up and prayed that last night was just an aberration and that Amanda would think differently in the light of day. I was wrong. When I walked into the kitchen, she was preparing breakfast and looked like she had just won the lottery. She smiled at me and pointed to the calendar hanging on our wall. I couldn't help but notice that today's date, May 14th, was surrounded by a thick black line. I sat at the table and thought about the irony of this date. In 1940, thousands of soldiers and sailors sought to free Europe from a tyrant. Today, I lost my wife to another oppressor. Amanda was almost dizzy when she brought me breakfast, placing it in front of me. She said, I know that you're worried, my love, but in a year from today, I will return to you and will be only yours. I really need this time to think about everything and get it out of my head, and I promise you that you won't regret it. She smiled contentedly at me when she spoke again. I called Robert this morning while you were still sleeping and told him all about how you gave me permission to go on vacation, and he would pick me up in an hour. My heart sank with every word she said, but I had to give her another chance. Amanda, you don't have to do this, and I wish you would take more time to think before you do this stupid thing. You cannot be sure that in 1 year you will cope with this clown. You just need to get him out of your head and work on getting our marriage back on track. I ask you not to risk destroying us. She smiled at me as if I were a fool and said kindly, John, I know how much you love me by giving me this time. Trust me, I know what I'm doing, and I will come back eventually, and our marriage will be even stronger. Now I need to finish packing, honey, so finish your breakfast. And just like that, she walked out of the kitchen and, for all intents and purposes, out of our marriage too. I finished eating even though my food had no taste and got up to get dressed. Walking into our bedroom, I noticed that Amanda had 3 large suitcases filled with her clothes and toiletries. She smiled at me and said tenderly, I think I have everything I need. Please take these bags to the porch for Robert. I looked at her blankly before answering no. Her face seemed to lengthen as she was shocked by my answer. I followed up my negative answer. Listen, if you're hell-bent on ruining 24 years of marriage, you and the jerk can take your bags together. There is no way I will help you get into this stupid bed. Is it clear? Amanda looked like she was about to cry before she answered irritably. He's not a jerk, John. Robert is a wonderful man and a hero who served our country. This is more than you've ever done. I turned away, muttering, yes, he received medals, 3 meals a day, and traveled the world while I had to spend 5 days a week at work to provide for you and our daughter. I think you're right. It didn't mean anything. Amanda lugged all her luggage down the stairs to the driveway and gave me dirty looks with every bag she took. A few minutes later, a car pulled up to our house, and a man who I can only assume was named Robert got out and started loading her things from our porch. Amanda shouted to him that she would be right there and then returned to the house to say goodbye to me. We awkwardly stood facing each other, and I was the first to break the silence. If you're really going to do this stupid thing, remember the ground rules. I don't want to see you or talk to you for this entire year. I think it was really starting to sink in what it might mean in her fevered brain as she meekly replied, I understand, John, but everything will work out, you'll see. Remember that you agreed to give me a year. She waited for me to say something, but I remained silent. Finally, with a more confused expression on her face, she said quietly, I really love you. She leaned in to kiss me on the lips, but I turned away at the last second, so she just touched my cheek. I quickly said, "I can't kiss you knowing that you're going to him." She started crying and then ran out of the house and straight into his arms. Standing at the front door, I watched her kiss him deeply, and rage rose from the depths of my soul. 2 minutes later, my driveway was as empty as my heart, and I truly realized that my wife was now another man's woman. I called in to work sick that morning and immediately went to the hardware store to get new locks. I worked all morning changing the locks on the house and changing the security codes on the alarm system. The good news was that it kept me occupied and distracted from thinking about Amanda. But when I finished, the sadness returned like a wave crashing on the shore. Then I did what any man would do. I turned off our home phone and started getting super drunk. The drinking session I was on was actually more of a search for relief from the pain I was feeling over losing Amanda, but it was a failure. My battle with booze continued until Sunday morning. At this point, I ran out of booze, which was good because I felt like I was going to die physically, spiritually, and mentally. I went to bed and fell into a deep sleep, only to be awakened by a knock somewhere in the house. I slowly woke up and stumbled along, trying to find the sound, which turned out to be my daughter, Olivia, knocking on the front door. When I let her in, she looked shocked by my condition and the smell of alcohol that hung throughout the house. Her first words were, "What the hell is going on, Dad?" I tried to concentrate. The sound of hammers in my skull was disturbing me, but I managed to croak. "What do you mean?" She looked at me as if I had grown a second head. She grabbed me and headed to the kitchen. "You need some coffee and food, Dad, and then you can explain to me what caused all this and how." Later, with food in my belly and coffee in my hand, I told her everything I knew about her mother and Robert. To say she was shocked would be an understatement. "Dad, let me make this clear. Does she want to take a year off from your marriage to reunite with her old high school boyfriend and let the romance run its course?" I nodded and replied, "Yes, something like that." Her next words were the same ones I had been asking myself since Friday. "What are you going to do, Dad?" I looked at her, and the words seemed to fall from my lips. "Tomorrow, he'll get sick again and go to the lawyer." She looked sad and began to say, "I can't believe Mom would do something like that. Maybe it's a mental disorder." I looked at her with a blank face and answered, "Olivia, I have no idea." She looked at me with a sadness that I had never seen on her face before. "I don't know what to say, Dad. I want to tell you to think about it, but honestly, this sounds like your best option." Olivia stayed with me for a few more hours and prepared dinner for me to eat later. As she left, she kissed me and told me again how sorry she was. When she left, I asked, "Why did you even show up here today?" She looked into my eyes. "Mom called and asked me to come and check on you, but she didn't tell me why or where she was." I nodded as if I understood. "Okay, thank you, and drive carefully, honey. I got really sick on Monday and also met with a lawyer. I was right in my judgment when I confronted Amanda. As a result, although the divorce was a decisive blow in my favor due to my spouse's refusal, it could prevent her from receiving half of my pension. Other marital assets were still in play. Now I know for sure that taking a year off from Amanda could be a good opportunity to liquidate those assets. The next 3 weeks flew by quickly. I was really surprised at how quickly I adjusted to being alone. The positive thing is that I realized that I felt a weight lifted from me because I no longer felt responsible for another person. The downside was waking up alone and going to bed alone. I didn't see or hear from Amanda until mid-July. On Saturday, I went for a few drinks at Alex's Tavern in our city. I was sitting at the bar when they walked in, holding hands like two teenagers in love. They were so passionate about each other that they didn't even notice that I was sitting at the bar. As I watched them, I paid particular attention to Robert. He was muscular and moderately attractive, and I could understand what Amanda saw in him, but he seemed to dominate her while she seemed to cater to his every whim. He spoke, and she listened, looking into his mouth. As she stood up to go to the lattice room, she finally saw me sitting at the bar and gave me a shy smile. Coming out of the lattice room, she hesitantly approached me. "Hello, John. How are you doing?" I wanted to tell her to get out but maintained my manners and replied, "Oh, about as good as you can expect when your wife of 24 years just leaves you for some scumbag. What else can I do for you?" She seemed confused by my sarcastic response but stood her ground. "John, I need to get into our house. I left some personal items there, and when I tried to come in the other day, my key didn't work. I continued to smile and answered in a friendly tone, well, Amanda, you shouldn't have been surprised that your key doesn't work in my house since you don't live there anymore. She just stood there and looked at me with a confused expression on her face before I spoke again. I think you better get back to your boyfriend before he gets worried. I saw tears well up in her eyes as she turned and walked away, and I went back to more important matters, which was finishing my drink. 2 minutes later, I felt a rough hand on my shoulder as I was spun around in my chair to greet a very annoyed Robert. Hey, jerk, you made my woman cry, and I don't like it. I felt like he was getting ready to hit me, and my heart began to pound as I realized that this guy could probably kill me before any help arrived. With more conviction than I felt, I went on the offensive. You were talking about my wife, not your woman, and since you stole her, you have nothing to say about what happens between the two of us. Now I'll tell you straight, jerk. You can hit me and impress her, but what impression will the cops make on you? I could see the wheels turning in his head and knew that Robert was not one of the world's great thinkers, but it encouraged me enough to continue my verbal attack. Now you have 2 options. 1. Hit me and spend a couple of years in prison. Or 2. Get out of my sight and go sit on your stupid ass. My heart was pounding wildly in my chest, and some part of my brain was screaming, why did you resist him? He will kill you. But I maintained a veneer of bravado as Robert stood there considering his options. Luckily, at that moment, the manager came over and asked what the problem was. Robert looked at him belligerently before answering, no problem, turning and slowly retreating toward Amanda. 5 minutes later, they paid the bill and left. Driving home that evening, I wondered what personal items Amanda wanted from the house and decided to find out. I spent about 3 hours unsuccessfully rummaging through closets and drawers until I pulled the boxes out of her bureau. Under the boxes were letters from Robert addressed to Amanda. As I read them, it became very clear to me that this year with Robert had been in the works for a very long time. One letter dated 5 years earlier stated, it was a relief to know that you still miss me as much as I miss you. When I get home, I want us to be together, so you will have to find some way to get rid of this weakling of a husband of yours. Reading them all was like reading a trashy novel. Most of them described either what he intends to do to Amanda or what they did in high school. By the time I finished, life without Amanda became much easier. I didn't see or hear from Amanda until August 15th, which was my birthday. When I came home from work that day, I found a covered pot on the porch and a happy birthday card. I took them inside, where I discovered that she had prepared a stew, which was my favorite dish. The card was supposed to wish me a happy birthday, and she wrote in it, John, I know we're not supposed to communicate, but I couldn't just ignore the birthday of the person I love so much. I dream about us at night, my love, and I know that when this year is over, I will be completely yours and he will be gone. Please never stop loving me or abandon us. Amanda. My daughter Olivia has been keeping an eye on me quite closely since Amanda left and called me on my birthday. After some small talk, she finally gave the real reason for the call. Dad, you know that my due date is in 3 weeks, right? How could I forget the birth of my first grandson? Yes, I know, honey. You and David must be so worried. A brief pause in the conversation alerted me to a potential problem. When she spoke again, Dad, David and I went to dinner with Mom and Robert. Mom wants to be there when my baby is born, and she wants Robert to be with her. I know you and your mom agree that you won't communicate for a year, but can you make an exception for me just one time, please? I was a little taken aback to learn that Olivia and her husband had dinner with these two, but I wouldn't spoil the birth of her first child. Okay, Olivia, she can come and bring the jerk with her if she needs to. Olivia immediately corrected me, Dad, stop calling him names. He's actually not such a bad guy, and he makes Mom really happy. I haven't seen her in such euphoria for many years now. I was stunned, and then I felt a wave of anger wash over me as I spat out. Your grandmother called him a jerk many years ago. Nothing has changed since then. And wow, first you're all having lunch together, and now you're defending him. I don't know what he has in store, but I'd love to bottle it. Soon he will take my entire family away from me. Just out of curiosity, when are you going to start calling him Dad? She spoke quickly, and I heard regret in her voice. Dad, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for it to sound like that. I can imagine how you feel, and I'm truly sorry. I interrupted her apology and said coldly, "It's okay. Forget about it. Listen, I have something in the oven that I need to take care of. Behave yourself." She said she loved me and hung up. It was probably then that I realized that my life would never be the same and that it was time to start resisting. First, start liquidating my assets to lower my net worth. Secondly, get rid of my fear and start returning to the world again. The next few days were stressful for me. First, I received some advice from my lawyer about what I could do with my assets legally. Then I got a little self-defense insurance in the form of a stun gun. I decided that the next time Robert attacked me, I wouldn't be able to talk my way out of it. Third, I booked a trip to Vegas in September. And fourth, I went online to find a woman my age who wants a good man for a stable long-term relationship. As for my assets, I could spend them or give them away. Since my wife does not live with me, it seems to be up to me how to distribute our assets. The reason I found this interesting is that it gave me quite a lot of leeway in what my future plans would be. When Olivia gave birth, I was at work, and my secretary answered the phone. The call came from her husband David, who was overjoyed to tell me that I now had a grandson. I congratulated him and said that I would come now. When I arrived at the hospital, I found out which room Olivia was in and went straight there. As I approached the door, I overheard her talking to Amanda. "Mom, what you and Dad are doing is incredibly pointless. Do you really want to lose him to Robert?" Amanda's voice was soothing. "Don't worry, Olivia. I'm not going to lose your father. He loves me too much to ever let me go. Plus, what I have now with Robert is amazing. It's hard for me to describe, but every day is the same as high school, only better now that we can sleep together. He treats me like I'm his princess, and he curls my toes every night. I have never had such wonderful intimacy in my life. I will truly miss this when I return to your father." Olivia's voice sounded disgusted. "Mom, I don't want to hear about your relationship with Robert. I admit he's an amazing guy, and you two seem so well suited to each other, but I want my child to have grandparents who are together and not divorced or fighting. Please, Mom, you have to go back to Dad, and you better do it before it's too late. He may be boring and predictable and definitely not in the same league as Robert, but Dad will always be there for you. Robert is, without a doubt, a dreamboat, but sooner or later, all boats sail on. On the other hand, Dad is a rock. He will never leave you if you do everything right. Beg him on your knees if necessary, but make him take you back." She was silent for a moment before she passionately pleaded, "Mom, don't wait too long, or I'm afraid you'll lose him." Amanda's voice once again showed how wrong she really was. "You don't have to worry about your father and me. When the time comes that I'm done with Robert, he'll gladly take me back." Olivia's voice was very skeptical. "I understand that you think you know Dad, but I've seen and talked to him, and he's definitely changing and not for the better. He seems bitter and more distant since you left him. Are you really willing to risk 24 years of a good marriage to be with your high school sweetheart?" I had heard enough, so I chose that moment to enter the room and shouted with a forced smile, "Hey, Mommy, congratulations on your new son. You two parents must be thrilled." I walked over and hugged Olivia, but pointedly ignored Amanda. I know it was immature to ignore her, but it was getting easier in my life. Amanda gave me a dirty look, but Olivia was delighted as she asked, "Have you seen him yet, Dad?" I shook my head. "No, baby. I just came to see how you were doing." Finally, tired of being insulted, Amanda intervened in a less than cordial tone. "Hello, John. How are you doing?" I looked at her for a moment and didn't answer, and then I turned my attention back to Olivia, asking her about the birth and the baby's name. At the last question, Olivia's face lit up, and she exclaimed joyfully, "David and I both agree that we want to name our baby John after you, Dad." It was at this point that Amanda solemnly left the room, telling us she was going to see the baby. When she left, I took Olivia's hands and held them as my tone of voice became serious. "Olivia, you already know that your mom and I probably won't work out." I saw that the truth of my words hit her hard. "No, Dad, don't think so. She will soon come to her senses and be home again." I felt my eyes mist as I continued, "Baby, I now understand that I was never enough for your mother. I think something will happen soon." Shock and disbelief showed on her face. "What?" I smiled sadly. "In the near future, am going to start divorce proceedings after I put things in order a little." She was in tears when she answered, "Oh, Dad. I told Mom that she should beg you to come back, but it's actually too late, isn't it?" I nodded in agreement. Yes, I won't be able to take her back. The memories of her deception would be too much for me. But please don't tell her anything yet, okay? She nodded and pulled me towards her for a kiss. We talked for a few more minutes about a myriad of things, but pointedly avoided any mention of my wife or her lover. Finally, I told her I would be back tomorrow and left her to look at the baby. I found my way to the children's ward and found my grandson there among numerous babies. I was in awe of how small and precious he was, and I realized he was beautiful. David immediately walked towards me, standing between me, Amanda, and Robert with a smile on his face. David handed me a cigar. "Here, Dad. Smoke to celebrate." I put the cigar in my pocket and patted him on the back. "They'll leave this for later, son. Thank you." Looking at my wife and her lover holding hands like two children, I felt sick. "Listen, David, they'll be back tomorrow when it won't be so crowded and the air will be cleaner, if you know what I mean." David smiled knowingly. "I completely understand you, Dad, and I don't blame you at all." As I was about to leave, Amanda shyly called out to me, "God, John, it seems like just the other day we were bringing our baby home, and now it seems so strange that our baby now has his own. I don't know where the time went, but it went too soon." I looked at her still holding hands with Robert and left the room without saying a word. She looked puzzled as I left them standing there. September came, and it turned out to be my best month since Amanda left. I went to Vegas with the intention of hitting the tables and losing as an excuse to reduce our joint assets. But what made the trip so enjoyable was the woman I met while I was there. Her name was Brenda, and she was a mature woman of about 50. I was surprised that she was still in the profession, but she said that many men want an older woman, and in my case, she was right. Brenda was expensive, but she made me feel more alive than I had in years. For the first time since she left me, I didn't really miss Amanda at all. Brenda was good both in and out of bed and seemed to take an interest in me, asking me for all the information about my soon-to-be ex-wife and her new lover. Before the night was over, she knew as much about me as I did. Brenda was stunned by my story and, leaving that evening, gently stroked my face. "John, I've only known you for a few hours, but I want to tell you something. You're a good person, and that doesn't come around very often. Believe me, because I know what I'm saying. I've seen and been with thousands of men, and I can count on the fingers of one hand the ones I really liked and respected. You are one of them. Your wife has no idea what she's missing. However, don't let her actions and stupidity change you. And if you ever come back to town, give me a call because I'd really like to see you again." Brenda in Vegas left me more confused than I was when I arrived. I thought about Brenda's words and realized that she was right. I was going to take revenge on Amanda for betraying me, even though she had been a good wife and mother for 24 years before the betrayal. No, I will not leave this marriage a ruined person. When I returned from Vegas, I told my lawyer to start preparing divorce papers. I also decided that I needed to find out a little more about Robert Carter. On the recommendation of my lawyer, I hired a firm to find out his history from high school to the present. The company was expensive, but I didn't care since half the money would come from Amanda's side. The firm was also reputed to be very thorough and assured me that they would have all the information I requested before Christmas. I also asked my boss about moving to a branch office of our company. At first, he was shocked because I always said that I would never move, but that was when I still had a family. He told me he would make inquiries and let me know. Thanksgiving was the next hurdle I had to overcome. Olivia called me about a week before the holidays to ask if I would have dinner with them. When I asked if her mother and Jerk would be present, she hesitantly answered yes. When I heard this, I firmly told her no and hung up. Surprisingly, my son-in-law called me next. David called my office and asked for a meeting. We agreed on a time, and I met him at a bar in the city center that was convenient for both of us for a quiet drink. The evening we met, I saw that he was excited. After our preliminary greeting, I ordered 2 double scotches. I sensed that something was bothering my son-in-law, so I sat back and listened to David tell me what was going on with my wife and daughter. "Dad, you won't believe it, but they are both crazy about him. All you can hear is Robert this and Robert that. You could have sworn he was that guy from the beer commercial, you know, the most interesting man in the world. He paused to take a sip of his drink. I was surprised to think that he would come here tonight to persuade me to come to Thanksgiving. I needed to know, so I asked, "Do I understand correctly, David, that you don't like dear Mr. Carter?" David looked at me with anger written all over his face. "Dad, this man is arrogant, self-centered, selfish, and a lot of worse words. He's so in love with himself that, for the life of me, I can't see where he has anything left for Amanda." Realizing what he had just said, his face became dejected, and he quickly retreated. "Sorry, Dad. I didn't mean to be disrespectful." I smiled at him. "Don't worry, son. Don't be offended. When did you start calling her Amanda instead of Mom?" He looked depressed. "Since she left you. Since then, I have never had any respect for her. Now I was wondering, why does it bother you that she left me, if I may ask?" His face burned with anger again. "I'm sure you noticed in the entire time I was with Olivia that I never talked to you guys about my parents, and I appreciate that you never asked about them. The truth is that my mother cheated on my father. Well, after that, my parents separated, and my father never got over it. He drank himself half to death, and my mother died along with her lover in a car accident. I don't like cheaters, and now that Amanda has become one, I really can't stand her anymore. I'm pretending to be for Olivia, but I'm worried." I had never known about David's parents before and felt his pain, but I was also puzzled by the source of his anxiety. "David, you say you're worried. What's bothering you, son?" He took a long sip from his glass, ordered another, then turned to me. "It'll probably piss you off when I tell you this, but you asked it yourself. The old saying like mother, like daughter scares me. If Amanda has turned into a cheater and keeps telling my wife how great it is, how long do you think it will be before Olivia gets the idea to try some new man too?" My eyebrows raised at this. "I think I understand your point of view." I joined him and took a long sip of my drink, contemplating my next move. "Listen, David, don't be discouraged. I have a few surprises in my pocket, and I think things may start to change in the new year. I also want to tell you strictly between you and me that I have some plans that should make it a good Christmas for you and Olivia, but not for the others if you know what I'm getting at." David smiled for the first time since sitting at the bar and spent the next 15 minutes questioning me to no avail. As we ended our meeting, I smiled again. "Are you forgetting something, David?" He looked puzzled. "About what, Dad?" I took him by the shoulder. "Shouldn't you try to convince me to be a big boy and come to Thanksgiving?" David's smile spread across his face like a flooding river. "Sorry, okay. Will you come to Thanksgiving, Dad?" I shook my head in response. "No, but I appreciate the invitation. Olivia called me twice more before Thanksgiving to beg me to come, until I finally put it into perspective. Look, Olivia, when your mother left me because of this jerk last May, I told her there would be no contact between us for the year. She wanted to end our marriage. I have already broken this rule once at the birth of little John, but I will not break bread with them. Is it clear? The holiday came, and I ate a frozen dinner. I was lonely and sad, but I was in a better place than if I had to watch Amanda and Robert make eyes at each other. December arrived, and with it, the specter of yet another family holiday. I was afraid of this, but I knew that it would be the last thing I would have to endure. December turned out to be a fruitful month. First, the company offered me a position in Spokane, Washington, starting in January, if I was interested. I told them yes. Secondly, the private investigator's report on Mr. Carter came in, and it was amazing. Apparently, old Robert had 3 wives, all of whom divorced him for adultery. Add to this 2 children from women other than his wives, for whom he was still paying child support, and the fact that his last wife received half of his pension in the divorce. The cherry on top of this spoiled ice cream was that Robert was transferred from E8 to E6 during his last year in the Navy. In short, his financial and moral situation seemed rather weak, not to say very bad. The latest good news is that Amanda will receive her divorce papers on the first business day after Christmas. Yes, now I felt the old holiday spirit flowing through me. I called Olivia and asked her about the plans for Christmas, and she again begged me to make it a real family affair. I asked if Robert would be present, and Olivia got angry at me. "Dad, you better get used to it. He's part of our family now, whether you like it or not." I stopped her abruptly. "You're right, I don't like it, but for the sake of the child, I will be there." Olivia seemed truly happy as she shouted, "Thank you, Dad. This will make everyone so happy." I was pretty sure that wouldn't happen, but who am I to ruin the fun? 2 days later, after returning home from work, the phone rang, and without thinking, I picked up. "Hello?" The line was awkwardly quiet, and I was about to hang up when a voice finally answered. "John, it's me, Amanda." "What happened, Amanda? Are you injured?" Her voice seemed timid as she spoke. "No, I'm fine, John, but I wanted to thank you for agreeing to come for Christmas. I know I hurt you, John, and am starting to realize how much, but I needed to tell you that I'm grateful because in the last 24 years, we've never been apart for a single holiday. I was miserable at Thanksgiving without you, and I've been thinking about us so much lately." I interrupted her trip down memory lane. "Well, Amanda, I'm glad to hear that you do think about us from time to time, but I should point out that when you started this whole vacation nonsense, I stipulated that there would be no communication between us. I relaxed this rule for one day at Christmas, so I think we should end this conversation now. Goodbye." When I hung up the phone, I felt terrible because I had never spoken to her so harshly in all the 24 years of our life together. But as bad as I felt about what I said, it wasn't as bad as the day she left me. The month dragged by slowly, and I had plenty of free time to do my Christmas shopping. I wanted to make sure I had gifts for everyone for Christmas. I also packed all the things I was going to take with me to my new job and rented a car to drive across the country. I also spoke to a nice woman at my new office who said she had picked out a couple of very nice, furnished apartments near the office. The good news was that she was going to show them to me in person when I arrived in Spokane. Yes, everything was going well for me in December. I arrived at Olivia and David's on Christmas Day to find that Amanda and her jerk had already gotten there. Olivia grabbed me and hugged me tightly as I walked in with a bag of gifts. She made a remark about what a surprise and then headed back to continue preparing dinner. I just smiled, thinking if only she knew what a surprise this was. David shook my hand and took my coat as I quickly asked, "Can I see my grandson?" David nodded and told me that he was sleeping in the nursery, but I could stop by. I quietly crept inside and looked at the sleeping figure in front of me. I felt a river of emotion flow through me, knowing that soon I would leave him, but I knew that I could not stay. I felt movement behind me as Amanda silently walked over and stood next to me. I sensed the irony that this was where she should have been since May, next to me. Amanda looked at me and said in a whisper, "We have a wonderful grandson, John." I was filled with sadness as I answered, "Yes, Amanda, but who is he going to call Grandpa? Me or the idiot, or both?" Amanda seemed surprised by the question. "Why are you so stupid? You are the only grandfather this child will ever have, John." I muttered quietly, "Let's hope you're right, Amanda," and then I left the room. The next few hours were interesting as David and I chatted while Olivia, Amanda, and Robert seemed to be in their own world. I was disappointed at how quickly my daughter succumbed to Robert's charms. David just looked unhappy, but I told him to hang in there as things were going to change tonight. His eyes flashed as he said conspiratorially, "I hope so, Dad. I can't stand that idiot around her anymore." At this rate, he'll soon be playing with Olivia. Dinner was served, and although the food was delicious, there was a lack of company. Again, I didn't feel the need to engage in conversation with either my wife or her lover, and David seemed pretty reticent to speak up too. The only one who spoke was Robert, as he regaled the women with tales of his courage and perseverance in the face of the enemy. Watching Robert with his fan club made me feel sick. After dinner, Olivia brought the baby into the living room, and we all sat around together. I looked at my family, knowing that this would likely be the last time this family scene would play out in my life. Olivia seemed happy as she excitedly told David to bring the gifts. When he brought them over, she handed them to her mom, Robert, and me. Amanda got a sweater, Robert got a gift card, and I got a tie. Useful if boring gifts, just like myself, according to my wife and daughter. When David, Olivia, and the baby opened their gifts from Amanda and Robert, Olivia smiled and laughed, but David acted polite but distant. Once everyone had finished opening their gifts, the room became a little quiet as they looked at me and my bag of gifts. Finally, I broke the silence by saying, "I want to end this wonderful weekend by giving you all the gifts you deserve on this holiday." I stood up to grab the bag I had brought and handed David and Olivia a large envelope wrapped in nice holiday paper. Olivia tore the paper off the envelope while David stood and watched. When Olivia took out the papers contained in the envelope and looked through them, she screamed with joy when she realized what it was. Amanda shifted in her chair and seemed eager to find out what the papers contained. Olivia wasted no time in bringing her up to speed as she shouted, "Oh, Mom, Dad gave us your house for free and without a mortgage. Now we can move out of this rental. Isn't that great?" Amanda's face seemed to fall as she looked at me with concern. "Why did you do this, John? Where will we live?" I gave her a venomous look that I hoped would reach her heart. "Don't worry, Amanda. I've thought of everything. Here, this is for you." And I handed her the card and the wrap box. There was a look of timid hope on her face as she tore open the brightly colored paper and found a bracelet in the box. When she pulled it out with surprise written all over her face, I said, "Look at the inside of it, Amanda. I wrote this." I noticed that Robert didn't seem very happy that I gave her a gift. She slowly turned it over and saw the words, "Thank you for the best 24 years of my life, John." I looked at the idiot, but he was still frowning at my gift. Amanda looked confused. "John, thank you, dear. This is quite beautiful, but you forgot to write with love." I smiled. "I didn't forget it, Amanda. I just didn't want to lie. I have been steadily losing my love for you these past few months. This bracelet is my way of saying goodbye and will be a reminder of what you gave up for your jerk. I also need to tell you that you will be served with divorce papers on Monday." I clearly heard Olivia take a deep breath, and Amanda's face contorted with disbelief and despair. I nodded at the postcard inside. The card I tried to express my gratitude for the fact that you gave me so many wonderful years and a wonderful daughter. There is also a check for half of our liquid assets. Of course, there are not so many of them. 180,000, but I spent it during your absence. The house was mine to give to my daughter when you voluntarily left your marriage, but that's all explained in the card too. I looked at Robert and thought about the volcano that was about to explode. "This gift is more for you too." I handed another large envelope to a clearly shocked Amanda. "Inside is the full story of what your lover has been up to since you broke up in high school. I think you will find this a fascinating read." Before I could finish my sentence, Robert roared at me, growling menacingly, "They'll kill you, you son of a—" Robert never actually managed to hurt me as he hit the floor hard when my stun gun hit him. Olivia stood up, as did Amanda, and I touched Robert twice again just to make sure he wasn't coming around too quickly. Coming closer to him, I said, "It hurts, doesn't it? Well, I'm here to tell you that your pain is nothing compared to losing the woman I loved for 24 years to a piece of garbage like you." Amanda was crying like the world was ending when I turned to her. "I know you think I'm boring, and I don't curl your toes like that jerk." Remembering him, I touched him again with the stun gun just because I liked seeing him convulse and smiled evilly, not addressing anyone in particular. This will never get old. I looked back at Amanda and, with more bravado than I felt in my broken heart, I said bitterly, "Anyway, I know how you feel about this misunderstanding, so I'm giving you the best gift of all, Amanda. Freedom. Now you can spend the rest of your life being treated like a princess during the day and having your toes curled at night. Wouldn't that be great for a traitor like you?" Amanda seemed apoplectic as she managed to choke out, "No, it wasn't supposed to be like that. I was going to come back to you in May, and John, I love you." Amanda was shaking as hard as a leaf in a storm as Olivia ran over to console her mother, and I tossed the jerk one more time before David nervously intervened. "You better not do that again. You might kill him, Dad." I stood up, looking down at my convulsing nemesis and then at the two women I loved more than life itself. "They'll leave now. Thank you for a wonderful day and for a wonderful life. Since I won't see you both for quite a long time, most likely never." Both women seemed speechless and stared at me as if they no longer knew who I was. David brought my coat and handed it to me with a satisfied smile on his face. Before leaving, I turned once again to my daughter, who for the first time in her life was looking at me with fear in her eyes. "Olivia, let this serve as a warning to you. If you go the way your mother did, you will pay the consequences just like she did. You will lose your husband, your home, your possessions, and the love of your life." I walked up to the cradle where little John was looking up at me and rubbed his cheek with my finger. "Bye, baby. Maybe we will see each other again someday, but for some reason, I feel that most likely not. Still smiling, I headed towards the door and, turning to the silent room, simply said, "Happy New Year, guys." By the time I got to my car, the woman's shock must have worn off, or maybe the jerk had returned to duty, but I clearly heard one plaintive voice shout, "No, this can't happen to me." As I got in and started the engine, I thought Vegas was on the way to Spokane, and I wouldn't mind seeing Brenda again. As I was backing out, David came outside, smiling and waving at me, and I waved back before heading west to a new life. Thanks for watching this shocking story of betrayal and revenge. What would you do if your partner asked for a year off to be with someone else? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more unbelievable stories. Until next time, stay strong. I was in my 3rd month of retirement, and I was learning how to be a good house husband. I was beginning to think my previous job was easier and more fun than cooking and cleaning. We still retained our weekly cleaning lady, so my cleaning chores were more about keeping everything tidy. Our children had long flown the nest, so keeping the house tidy was hardly a chore. I received a golden handshake for my job as vice president of a major financial institution, and the offer was just too good to turn down. My wife, Jessica, and I, Patrick Hunter, spent countless hours discussing my retirement offer and decided it would be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I was given $4 million in cash, with a matching amount going into my 401k. I also received 50 of my monthly salary for life and was able to keep all my other benefits, including insurance. We both thought this was very generous, so at the age of 59, I found myself without a job for the first time since I was a teenager. Although I had several things I wanted to explore, writing was one of those. I had long aspired to write, but never found the opportunity. Also, I wanted to learn woodworking, something I found fascinating but again had no experience with. Jessica, my wife of 30 years, was simply the love of my life. She was 6 years my junior at 53, and she had changed little since the first time we met back in college when she was a junior while I was in graduate school. I fell in love at first sight and courted her tirelessly for 6 months before she agreed to a date. The rest is history, as we began to date exclusively and got married after she graduated. Our 2 children were born during the 2nd and 3rd year of our marriage, and then I got a vasectomy, as we agreed 2 was enough. Jessica was a fantastic mother and stayed at home until both children started school. She then got a job in the HR department of a large regional hospital. She is a very caring and unselfish person, and that persona comes across naturally when she meets new people. Our 2 children are now both settled in professional jobs and have families. Neither lives nearby, but both are within a 4-hour drive. Jessica has worked at the hospital for 20 years and was promoted last year to Chief of Human Resources, a position that carries a lot of responsibility with high expectations. Before I get ahead of myself, a little more about Jessica and me. Jessica is slender, with auburn hair, and standing at 56 with shapely legs and a sweet little figure. She has always had a high libido and is always ready for sex. Jessica knows that turns me on. Sex with Jessica is so enjoyable because she is proactive and really gets involved. She isn't the passive type of woman. I know Jessica would be up for daily sex, but I can only deal with it 2 or 3 times a week. My old body needs time to recover. In short, Jessica is always ready for a romp. My name is Patrick. I'm 59 and a little overweight. I stand 510 and consider myself pretty much out of shape. One of my retirement goals, in addition to what I've already stated, is to lose weight and get back into shape. Working in finance is not conducive to maintaining a lean body. I thought if I could lose weight and get in better shape, I would be able to enjoy an improved sex life. So, here I am in my 3rd month of retirement, enjoying the daily benefits of going to the gym, having lost 15 pounds and 2 inches around my waist, and feeling quite proud of myself. My muscle tone has actually improved, and the softness in several areas has now been replaced with muscle. My gym has a boxing ring, and I hired one of the older trainers to teach me the finer skills of boxing. Boxing is brutal, but after a while, I began to accept being beaten and actually started landing a few blows myself. I thought Jessica would notice my changed body when we had sex, but she never said a word. Instead of pumping for 5 minutes and taking a rest break, I could now pump a solid 10 minutes or more until I was done. I always got her off, but she never mentioned a word about my improved body or performance. I didn't tell Jessica I was going to the gym, and she never noticed I was eating less and had cut back on alcohol. I just put it down to her new workload and the stress of the job. She seemed preoccupied, and finally, I asked her about it during dinner. I said, "You seem totally distracted lately. like you're in a different zone and unaware of anything going on around you. What's wrong? Jessica thought for a second and replied, Nothing's wrong. I'm just overwhelmed by work. Would you like to share anything? No, I said. I just need to work it through myself, but thanks for asking. And that's where we left it. Jessica has to travel every quarter for an HR meeting. She works at a regional hospital, and there are over 40 hospitals scattered across the South and the larger cities. The HR chiefs all gather to meet, discuss strategies, staffing, work through problems, and set financial goals. The meeting goes from Thursday afternoon through Saturday, with return on Sunday. The usual venue is the Hilton Hotel in whatever city is chosen. This would be the 4th time for Jessica. I know she looks forward to going, and because of her position, I encourage her. Networking with other HR chiefs is very beneficial, and understanding what works for one often works for all. We usually eat dinner at 7:30, even though Jessica officially finishes work at 5. She is rarely able to come home by then, so with that in mind, I schedule dinner for the later time. If she is unable to get home in time for dinner, I usually get a text. She texted the Wednesday before her Thursday departure, saying she was going to be late as she needed to buy a few things for her trip. I said no problem, I would put a plate in the microwave. She got home around 8 with several bags of clothes. Jessica always dresses professionally and maintains a very fashionable wardrobe, so I wondered why she needed so many new things for her conference. I was working on my computer that night while she packed. Later, we had wonderful sex and drifted off to sleep holding each other. The next morning, we both made breakfast. Afterward, as she got into her car, I had a tear in my eye. I could count on one hand the number of times Jessica and I had been apart during our marriage, and 4 of those times had been for her conferences. Jessica and I texted and called each other frequently while she was gone. Before I knew it, she was back. She seemed extra excited upon her return, and we had even better sex than normal. On Sunday afternoon, she stayed in bed afterward and napped while I got dinner together. We shared a nice bottle of wine during dinner, and then she went back to bed, using the exhaustion excuse again. I cleaned up and spent some time on the computer before joining her in bed. The next morning was a bit of a rush with Jessica getting ready for work, making time for breakfast and coffee just before she departed. She asked if I would do her laundry, something she always did herself on Sunday afternoon after returning home. Yesterday, she had just collapsed from exhaustion. I picked up her laundry from the bedroom floor, as well as the bathroom. I always turn the pants inside out before putting them in the washing machine, and imagine my surprise when I pulled a pair of thong underwear out of one of the legs. I had asked Jessica for years to wear thongs, but she had always refused, saying she didn't want a strap between the cheeks of her but claiming it would be uncomfortable. I was completely stunned. Naturally, I smelled the crotch, and they definitely smelled like my wife. Why had she bought and worn a pair of thongs? Surely not for me, because I wasn't even there. Was Jessica having an affair? Was I getting seconds? Yesterday when we had sex, I became emotional and had to sit down. There had to be an excuse. This was so unlike Jessica, but she had been different this past year. What would I do? Should I confront Jessica? I decided to snoop a little and see if there was anything else. I looked through her closet, but found nothing unusual. Then I checked her chest of drawers and again came up empty. Her suitcase was sitting just inside her closet, so I pulled it out, but it was locked. Why lock it after you unpack? Fortunately for me, it was a Samsonite suitcase, and all the keys are the same for the same type of suitcase. We had bought matching suitcases 2 years ago, so I found my key and unlocked Jessica's suitcase. I was speechless by what I found inside. There was a pair of expensive designer heels, 4-inch stilettos. I had known Jessica for years, and she had never worn anything higher than 3 inches, and she certainly wouldn't pay $500 for a pair of heels that she only wore once in a while. There was a large garment-sized Ziploc bag inside with lingerie, and it was all Racy Moore thongs, half-cup bras, stockings, and very sexy nightwear. What the hell was going on during her conferences? I put everything back and relocked her suitcase. What was I going to do? I loved Jessica more than anything, or anybody, in the world. She was my rock. We shared everything, did everything together. I could not live without her. That night, during dinner, I told Jessica that I had found something very odd in the laundry. This piqued her interest, and she asked what it was. I said, I will show you, and got up to collect the thong, returning to the table, placing it in the center. I found this rolled up in the leg of your dress pants. I've asked you for years to wear thongs, and you've always refused. Is there something you want to tell me? She thought for a moment and finally replied, I bought them for you. Okay, if they're for me, why have you already worn them? She rarely got angry, but I could see her face turning red, and I realized she was about to lose it. "You have never been jealous or questioned anything I've ever done," I replied. "You've never given me a reason to be jealous or question you," I added. By now, Jessica was almost shouting. "Why are you questioning what I do now? I've never been unfaithful, not once. Just explain the thongs, and well, drop it." "Well, you've been after me for years to buy some, so I have. I wore a pair to see how they feel." "Okay, did you buy anything else you want to share?" "No." With that short exchange, we dropped it. I realized my investigation needed to be bumped up a notch because I realized that Jessica had not come clean and totally didn't mention the other items in her suitcase. I went and worked on my computer, and finally, Jessica went upstairs. I checked the kitchen for her purse and cell phone, but she must have taken them with her. Her laptop was still laying on the table, so I took it into my computer room and locked the door. I checked her home email and found nothing unusual. Then, I checked her work email and again found nothing. I looked into the history and found a Yahoo account that was often used, but without a username and password, I would be locked out. I had to check her cell phone the next morning. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of the shower running, but I had no idea how long she had been in there. Her purse was on the dresser, so I quickly grabbed her cell phone and unlocked it. Her text messages revealed nothing. I typed Yahoo Mail into the browser bar, and Yahoo opened up. Her username and password had been saved, so I only had to click open. The guy's name was David, and he appeared to be a predator. He was the HR chief at a hospital about 3 states over. He wanted Jessica to dress sexier and be more open with him. From what I could gather, they had not had sex, but had seriously made out. Jessica seemed reluctant. I heard the shower turn off, so I quickly shut everything down and replaced her phone. I had the guy's first name, knew where he worked, and what he did. I went to the hospital directory and, within a few minutes, had his full name. Then, I paid $30 for an online people search, and in moments, I had his full history, including names of family members, phone numbers, email addresses, and of course, his physical address. One of my golfing friends is a lawyer who has connections on the local police force, so I called him and asked if he could arrange to have the guy's name run through the police database. He called back minutes later and had discovered that the guy had been charged but never convicted of 3 counts of sexual harassment. Apparently, in all cases, the charges had been dropped. He was a serial sex predator. 3 charges against him can't all be wrong. Maybe he's innocent of 1, but surely not 3 charges. I was determined not only to ruin the guy, but also to make sure he couldn't or wouldn't have sex with Jessica. This was much easier said than done. The next morning, I got access to Jessica's cell phone, found the username, and cracked the password. Later, I pulled up Yahoo Mail on my computer and started searching for any relevant communications. We were both very consistent in using passwords that meant something to us. I spent an hour before I figured it out. Jessica's password was the name of her first dog from childhood. She had often talked about that dog, so I was very familiar with the name. I was in Jessica's private email now, and as long as I didn't open unread messages, Jessica wouldn't know I had snooped. Apparently, David had been hitting on her since the first conference. He had taken it slowly, but by the last conference, he got to second base. I think he was hoping there would be a home run at the next conference. I printed out copies of all his emails. His emails were like love letters, and I had the feeling he was grooming her. Jessica's responses were typical, short and to the point. She did not want to have an affair, but at the last conference, she had let things advance further than she was comfortable with. I started developing a plan for the next conference and needed enough evidence to hang him, but I also wanted to prevent them from having sex. I went to a local electronics store and bought a minicam with a transmitter that worked over Wi-Fi. All I had to do was pair it with my tablet computer after downloading some special software. Jessica spends considerable time in our bedroom each night, so that's where I placed the camera. The camera had an audio receiver so I could hear and see what was going on. That night, after dinner, Jessica went upstairs while I relaxed in my computer room. I powered up the camera, and my tablet came alive with a view of Jessica in our bed. Jessica was relaxing on the bed and reading a novel. After an hour, her cell phone rang, and it was David. Luckily for me, Jessica put the conversation on speakerphone. They chatted about work, and David kept saying he was looking forward to the next conference so he could see the different lingerie Jessica had bought. Jessica didn't promise, but just said, "We'll see." The pig knew all the right things to say, and Jessica was soon rubbing between her legs. I needed to end this, so I made some noise going up the stairs and found Jessica reading her novel. I brushed my teeth, got into bed, and lay beside her. I love you to the moon and back, and as you know, I've never even once looked at another woman. I would be crushed if I ever found you in the arms of another man. You know my feelings on infidelity. This is all I think about. I've never been unfaithful to you, and I have no intentions to do so. What brought this on? She asked. Why this sudden jealousy? I replied. Well, it's because I found that thong. I've never questioned your loyalty or been jealous, but now I'm confused. I want to believe you, but part of me thinks otherwise. I'm sorry, but I feel as if something is going on you're not sharing with me. Jessica sat there, looking lost, and then sighed. The weeks passed, and I continued to watch the minicam. David called Jessica weekly, and they were making plans for the next conference. The cam worked so perfectly that I decided to buy another one and sneak it into Jessica's room while she was in a meeting. I could then monitor her actions from a nearby room. I am not a voyeur, and certainly not the type of husband who gets turned on by seeing his wife in the arms of another man. My intention in setting up the cam was to prevent Jessica from having sex, certainly not to watch her and get off from it. I was determined not to be a fool. The week of the conference arrived, and this time it was in a city called Austin, a place known for its music scene, which might affect my plans. I watched Jessica pack for 2 days and saw nothing out of the ordinary. However, when I took the trash out, I checked Jessica's car and noticed a separate bag in the trunk. I knew what was inside and figured she would just swap out her clothes at the airport. Jessica left the next morning with a kiss and an I love you. I followed her 3 hours later. At the hotel check-in, I explained that I was Jessica's husband and was meeting her, and after showing ID, they gave me a key to her room. I knew she was in a meeting from 3 to 5, so I quickly went up to her room and set up my minicam with a view from the door to the bed. The operation to hide the camera in Jessica's room only took 10 minutes, so I approached the check-in desk to find a different person working. I asked for a room on the same floor as Jessica's, but a few doors away. I had to get as near as possible to be within range of the transmitter. My excuse was that I was near the elevator. Luck was on my side as I was assigned a room 3 doors away. You know the saying about the best laid plans? Well, it's true. The problem with cams is getting the darn thing to communicate first with a Wi-Fi signal, then with the receiver, which in my case was my tablet computer. It worked perfectly in our home, but I could not get the connection at the hotel. Wi-Fi in a hotel is so much trickier than at home. I spent hours trying to establish a link, but I was unsuccessful. I couldn't get the transmitter and the camera to connect to the hotel's Wi-Fi. I felt like a duck out of water. I was so close to Jessica, but had no clue what she was doing. So, I called her. She answered straight away. Ed, you never call this early. Are you okay? No, I'm not okay, I said. I was just taking a nap and dreamed of a strange man making out with you. It was so real I had to call and hear your voice. You know you can trust me, she said. Thanks. I feel better already. I just needed to hear you. I miss you so much. I'm going to change to go out to dinner, and will call you as soon as I return to my room. I promise. I love you. Okay. Speak to you in a couple of hours. I love you so much. Don't go flashing your boobs on Bourbon Street, I joked. She just laughed. I slipped into her room while she was gone and left a dozen red roses in a vase. I placed a card that said simply, "So you won't forget me." She called me straight away after returning to her room, and I answered immediately. We talked about dinner. She said it was good and that she had enjoyed the company of a couple of other HR chiefs. She thanked me for the roses, and I asked her to put her phone on FaceTime so I could see her. Jessica was a little careless, and I could see her blouse was undone. I asked her about it. "I'm getting ready for bed," she said. We finally said goodnight. I wasn't sure how I was going to endure the next 2 days. I knew the creep was with her at every opportunity. Had he already screwed her? Friday afternoon, when the conference ended, I was hiding in the bar when they went up to her room. I gave them 45 minutes and couldn't wait another second longer. I opened the door and entered her room. I walked in and saw that they were heavily making out, oblivious to my presence. I took several photos and a short video with my cell phone. Finally, tired of the show, I grunted, and Jessica immediately became aware of my presence. She pushed David off her and tried to sort out her clothes. I flat out told him to get the hell out of the room before I beat him up. He wasn't threatened by me, but feeling humiliated, he left. "Darling wife, would you like to tell me what exactly is going on?" I asked. "Oh Ed, I'm so sorry. I got into this mess. I've been so confused. I am not sure what to do. I love you, but I crave the attention I get from David. What is his name, and how long has this been going on?" "David Becker." I started talking to him when I attended the first conference, and our conversations have just continued at every conference since. Okay, except you no longer just talk to him. No, we've started kissing, and I have allowed him to fondle me. I find it hard to believe that's all that's happened. However, are you aware that the next step will be full sex? I mean, you were undressed, and your body was full of his fingers when I entered the room. I did not intend to allow it to go that far. Doesn't kissing and fondling turn you on? How will you resist him going further if he hasn't already? I bet you are wet as a drowned rat now. Jessica turned around on the bed and started crying. Then she asked if I would stay the weekend with her. She didn't trust herself to be alone with David. She laid there until she drifted off to sleep, and I watched her for an hour before waking her. Her eyes were red and swollen. I was extremely angry and hurt, but I told her, let's dress up and go out to dinner then and dancing. Let's have a good time and try to put this mess behind us. If you want me to stay with you, then I will. That man won't get near you again. She had nothing but sexy clothes to wear, obviously all newly purchased. She was embarrassed as I watched her dress in her half-bra, followed by a thong and thigh-high stockings. Then she put on a figure-hugging black dress with heels. I told her that I knew she had only brought sexy clothes, and I was hurt because she was wearing clothing for David that she wouldn't wear for me. She apologized and said, I will wear whatever you ask in the future. I wondered what the future would hold. Dinner was good, but I ate too much and felt like a slug afterward. We went back to the hotel bar. The dance floor was crowded, and Jessica wanted to dance. Because of my exercise program, I was in much better shape and able to dance without getting tired. We really had a good time. I excused myself to go to the bathroom, and when I returned, Jessica was not at our table. I found her on the dance floor in the arms of David. I was having none of this, so I interrupted them and advised David to keep his hands off my wife not just now, but also in the future. I added that he was lucky I didn't trash him earlier. Jessica tried to smooth things over, and I just told her to be quiet. David, about 6 inches taller than me and at least 50 pounds heavier, was not intimidated by me. He just laughed and asked how a chicken like me could back up that threat. Like a bully, he took the first punch, catching me off guard. I was on my back and momentarily saw stars. The side of my face felt like it was on fire. I struggled to my feet and faced him. Despite the mismatch in sizes, he rushed me. I sidestepped and tripped him. He came at me like a madman, and I landed 4 solid punches as I danced around him. My gym training was paying off. I'm sure his pride was hurt, but he kept coming, and I kept punching. Finally, he slowed down and left himself open, so I kicked him in the balls, followed by a left and right combination that put him on the floor. For good measure, I kicked him in the balls again. That felt good. He said, enough, and was lying in the fetal position, holding his groin, obviously in pain. I looked down at him and said, leave my wife alone, or I won't be so kind next time. I backed away, looking for Jessica, and saw her rushing to David's side. That proved her loyalty and who she wanted to be with. I paid the bill and left. The bartender had seen everything and said he would smooth it over with the police, as David had thrown the first punch. I left, saying I didn't want to press charges. I didn't see Jessica again that night, as I spent the night in my old room. I don't know if she spent the night in her room or not. The next morning, after removing the cam, I checked out and flew home. The following day, Jessica was due to arrive back from Austin. I was in the kitchen drinking coffee with my suitcases packed when she arrived. Ed, why did you leave Friday night? She asked. Jessica, why should I stay? I didn't see us having much of a marriage left. You decided who you wanted to be with, and it wasn't me. I'm sorry, but you hurt David, and I was concerned for his injuries, she replied. Have you forgotten who threw the first punch? Look at my eye. Does it look normal to you? I asked. My eye was totally black and still swollen I could barely see. I know you spent Friday night with that jerk, and most likely all day Saturday and that night too. You must be well drilled by now. I didn't have sex with him, she snapped. I'm tired of your lies, Jessica. I'm leaving, and you will hear from my lawyer this week. We've had 30 years of happiness, and now you've thrown it away for a weekend with some worthless piece of trash. Are you aware that he had been charged by the police 3 times for sexual harassment? I added. No, I didn't know that. You've lied and deceived me for the past several months. I cannot tell you how much you've hurt me. I was onto your little game almost from the beginning, I said. I'm so ashamed. I beg your forgiveness. Jessica, did you sleep with David after I left? I asked. No. He pressured me terribly, but I didn't. How can you prove it? I challenged her. I can't. You'll just have to take my word for it. So you're saying I can believe what you say and trust you? Why should I? I'm telling the truth, she said, almost pleading. I pulled up her skirt and discovered she wasn't wearing panties. What do you say to that? And where are your panties? I assumed that was from this morning, just before you left. I'm sorry. It was only one time. Please believe me. After the beating you gave him, he couldn't get out of bed until this morning. He came to my room just as I was leaving for the airport and demanded we have sex. He bullied me until I finally consented, she said. I picked up my suitcases and said, my lawyer will be in touch. Be prepared to be destroyed. I left. A few days later, I checked into a Hilton hotel and realized I needed to speak to my children. I called them on a conference call and explained my plans for a divorce from their mom. They were both devastated that their mom would do such a thing. We were all crying when we hung up. Within minutes, Jessica called me. Now, I was the one in trouble. How could you tell our children and turn them against me? She said, wait a minute. Are you now saying I betrayed you and hid a relationship from you for months, then had sex with a predator? I'm confused. I thought you were the one who deceived me and cheated. Jessica hung up on me. That night in the hotel, I sent several screenshots to David's wife. The screenshots showed him in various photos, first with him kissing Jessica, then with her topless in bed, and finally several with David in intimate poses. I might be an angry husband, but I wanted my pound of flesh, and someone else should share my pain. The next morning, I called my lawyer, who referred me to an excellent divorce lawyer. I went to the bank and split the money 50-50, including my severance pay and 401k. That was more than she deserved. I canceled all the credit cards and got one in just my name. Jessica's cell phone belonged to the hospital, so I took care of that as well. I saw the divorce lawyer that afternoon and instructed him to go for the jugular. I was tired of being the nice guy. He was also instructed to serve Jessica at his earliest convenience. I finally thought I was thinking rationally and called the hospital CEO, whose office was in Atlanta. He's a busy man, but I managed to beg 5 minutes of his time. I explained how David Becker had seduced my wife at the HR conferences. I had copies of all the emails to back up my story. I asked why the hospital would hire an administrator who had been charged with, but not convicted of, several cases of sexual harassment. Surely, anyone with more than one charge against them should raise red flags. Didn't they do background checks? He was stunned and didn't have an answer, but promised he would investigate. I asked for his fax number so I could send a copy of the emails. I told him I would also email further photographic evidence if he wanted it. Finally, he wanted to know what I wanted. I want Becker fired, I said. My wife has been hunted down and seduced by a sexual predator, and she shouldn't be disciplined because of this mess. There's no reason for Jessica to lose her job. That evening, Jessica called me. She had settled down. Ed, why did you send those photos? She asked. Are you in trouble? I sent photos to David's wife, not yet, but I may be later on. Apparently, she has shared them with the hospital. You do realize everything will come out in divorce court? Jessica said. I'm charging you with adultery, and this type of divorce can get very messy. The photos, plus all the details, will come out in court. David's wife had left him, and he was fired that day. That's one of the reasons I sent the photos. Do you know he has 3 kids still living at home? She asked. Have you forgotten we have 2 kids of our own? I replied. You seem more concerned about David and his troubles than about ours. Why is that? Jessica paused. I feel sorry for them. David and his family are younger. Are you aware that he's a sexual predator? I simply hung up the phone. Jessica didn't call back for the rest of the week, but I found out she had been served. I put a deposit on an apartment I could afford and finally got out of that expensive hotel. Now I was back to cleaning again, but honestly, I did very little cleaning. I really didn't care with my time alone. I hit the gym twice a day and boxed in the afternoon. I was getting hit less while my punches were finding their targets. My body was becoming toned, and I was developing some serious abs. I was on a strict diet that included no alcohol, and I was finally at my goal weight. The gym threw a party for me, and we all celebrated with carrot juice. The weeks passed, and through the grapevine, I discovered that Jessica was about to lose her job because of the affair. There's little tolerance for anyone in her position to play around, especially with another employee. I didn't really care, because since I was unemployed, I didn't think the court would force me to pay alimony. I made a note to check with my lawyer. We had been separated about 3 months when Jessica called and asked if we could talk. I agreed, and we planned to meet at a local cafe. Jessica looked good, maybe a little thinner, and I complimented her on her weight loss. She thanked me, but again, never mentioned my own weight loss. Here I was, standing in tight-fitting clothes with bulging muscles. I had lost 6 inches off my waist and nearly 50 pounds, and she was clueless. Jessica started crying and telling me she had lost her job and had no job prospects. I told her to move out of the house so we could sell it and reminded her that she had a lot of money in the bank, maybe not enough to retire on, but enough to live on for several years. I knew she was hinting for me to come home, but I never took the bait. For now, I was happy doing what I was doing. Then, she started talking about David again. He, too, had lost his job, as well as his family. I said, good. Now he can screw you whenever you want, and you won't have to hide what you were doing. I haven't seen him since that last conference and have no plans to, she replied. I understand what you told me about him, and now I just wish I had never met him. I have somewhere I need to be, and I didn't come here to talk about David. What do you want? I asked her. Please come back home, she said, her voice pleading. I don't trust you anymore. I don't think I can live with you again. You deceived and lied to me so much that I am finished. You care more about David and his family than about us and our family. I put my family first, but apparently, you don't. When you want to talk and won't mention David, let me know. I do not want to hear about the guy you screwed. I got up angrily and left. The divorce was finalized, and almost a year passed. Because of our assets, cash in the bank, and because we were both unemployed, I didn't have to pay alimony. My lease on my apartment was coming to an end, and I needed to find somewhere to live, as I didn't want to stay there. I hadn't heard from Jessica, although my children kept in touch with her, and they kept me informed about what and how she was doing, which apparently wasn't too well. I asked if she was seeing anyone, and they replied no. She was too hurt and upset. Besides, she was still in love with me. However, I was pleased to hear that she was seeing a counselor. During my search for a place to live, I found a large, 100-year-old fixer-upper on the edge of town. In a few years, it would be a ritzy neighborhood. The house had been on the market unsold for 2 years, so although I knew nothing about working with wood and renovating old houses, I put a low bid on it. To my astonishment, my bid was accepted. I had a thorough professional inspection done, which highlighted what needed to be accomplished or replaced. I had 5 pages of work to do on a house that needed so much. I was only able to go to the gym once a day, but I wasn't trying to lose weight anymore, just maintain my current weight. I threw myself into working on the old house. I worked on the house from the time I got up until I went to the gym in the evening, and I was sleeping better than ever. My body stayed sore all the time, but I was in good condition. Working on the house used different muscle groups, and my body became even more toned and muscular. The roof needed to be replaced, so I had it done professionally, as it was too big of an undertaking for me. The same with the electric wiring and plumbing. I also had a new air conditioning system with ductwork installed. Those jobs had to be done by professionals, and I was happy to pay what they charged. The downside to all this was that I had overspent my budget, so further renovations had to be done as I could afford them. I realized I needed help but couldn't afford to pay very much, which ruled out long-term professional help. So, I placed an ad in the local paper. Responses were few and far between, but a couple of responses came from men in their 70s and one from a high school student. A few days later, I was working outside, and it was very hot. I was wearing baggy clothes and a hat when a car pulled up and Jessica got out. Hello, Jessica. How have you been? Well, not so good. You know I lost my job. In fact, I'm having problems finding work. Yes, someone told me you had lost your job, but you have enough cash and investments to live a long time. You don't really need to work. I would like to volunteer to help you renovate the house. At one time, we worked really well together as a team. We did everything together. I wondered how she found out, and then realized our children must have told her. Yes, I remember, but that was before you took the job as chief of HR. After that, you became a changed woman and had little regard for our marriage. I've apologized 1,000 times. I really don't want us to get upset and argue. I didn't come here for that. I would like to work with you on the house and don't really care about the pay. Whatever you can afford. I sighed. I do need help, and I haven't been able to find anyone, so I accept your offer. However, we are divorced, and I have no intentions of taking you back. I understand and accept whatever terms you think are fair, she replied. Okay, be here at 7 in the morning and wear old clothes. A year and a half had passed since the last time Jessica and I spent time together. So, I was nervous. Deep down, I felt like she was trying to get back in my good graces. However, my hurt, although serious at one time, had largely disappeared. I was determined to stay single. We had always been a good team when working together, but I needed help. So, even though I was reluctant to work with Jessica, I agreed. Jessica actually showed up at 6:30 the next morning, and she was dressed for work. I was shaving when she arrived, so I just shouted down to help herself to coffee. I was wearing shorts and a t-shirt when I entered the kitchen. Jessica took one look at me and dropped her coffee cup. Ed, what happened to you? I've never seen you looking so buff. And when did you start shaving your head? I started working out when I retired, but you never took the time to notice. In all, I've lost 65 pounds and 6 inches off my waist. I've been lifting weights, and now I actually have a six-pack. I lifted my shirt to show her. Oh my God, Ed, how could I have been so blind not to have noticed? She gasped. Have you been learning how to fight too? Yes, I've been boxing since I retired. If you had taken the time to notice, you would have seen bruises on my body and face when we were still together. I've often wondered how you took on David, especially after he laid you out on the floor. You were able to come back and beat him fair and square. I've never seen you lift a finger against anyone, and I thought that was so out of character for you. Well, I thought I was fighting for my woman, the love of my life. I had luck on my side because he was pretty slow. I've improved a fair bit since then. He wouldn't stand a chance with me now. Jessica sighed deeply. I feel so stupid. I was totally blinded when I held the top HR job. I thought everyone was below me, including you. So, I shut out everything and everyone that meant something to me. I thought you were a different person when you were promoted. You were also wrapped up with someone else. So even though we were married and living together, you never actually saw or listened to me. I'm sorry I was so selfish, she continued. I've been going to a counselor, and I hope you'll be able to see it's changed me. I've realized since the first day you started working with me that you've changed. You are more like the Ed I was married to before you got that promotion. I like the current you much better. We cleaned up the spilled coffee, sat down, and talked about the house and what work was required. She talked about how she had always wanted a house like this, but we never had the time, money, or skills to renovate one. I replied that I still questioned my skill level and that if I had the money, renovating an old house is terribly expensive. We both agreed that the house would be wonderful when finished. Jessica saw things differently from me, so having her input was welcome, although I still questioned how we would work together. Just so you know up front, as far as I'm concerned, this is just a job, and I will make no promises. When the work is finished, we are divorced, and I aim to stay that way, I said, reinforcing my intentions. I understand, Jessica replied. I just want something to keep me busy. I can get by without pay, but I want to feel useful. We've always worked well together, and this is really important to me. I would like to see your renovation through to the end. I will have no expectations when the job is finished. I promise. Okay, I said. We are going to start by painting the outside walls and windows. Then we'll start inside. But before we do anything, the outside walls have to be prepped. Jessica was much more agile on the ladder than I was, so I turned over the higher areas to her, and she did a wonderful job. She could climb up and down that ladder like a monkey. She was also a much quicker painter than me. We spent 10 days painting the outside of the house. The days were hot, and I usually painted in just my cargo shorts. I caught Jessica staring at me several times. I think she saw a different person, but I wasn't sure if she liked what she saw or not. Jessica started wearing less toga or work clothes, replaced by gym shorts and halter tops. She was as beautiful as ever. Our working relationship grew a little each day. We laughed and shared good memories from the past. Jessica packed a picnic lunch each day for both of us, and we would sit under the big oak tree and share our food. I hate to use the word romantic, but our lunches were, and I started looking forward to them. We worked long days, from 6 a.m. until 6 p.m., only stopping for lunch or a cup of coffee. With the two of us working, we were able to accomplish so much more, not to mention that Jessica worked quicker. Jessica started volunteering to stop a few minutes early to make dinner before she went home. The food was delicious, and naturally, I had to ask her to stay for dinner. This became a regular thing for us. I did not want to admit it, but we were getting closer as a couple. We never argued, had cross words, or spoke of her past indiscretions. I had mixed feelings about Jessica. I enjoyed her company. She was an awesome worker, and true to her word, she never mentioned the pig she had screwed, nor did she ever even suggest us getting back together. We just enjoyed each other's company. We had been trying to sell our house that we had shared for so long, and finally, it sold after 1.5 years on the market. We had 30 days to close, so we had to empty the contents. Jessica also had to find a new place to live because she was still living in the family home. Jessica suggested that, since the furniture was half mine, I should buy out her share and furnish the new house with our furniture. I thought that was a good idea, as all of our antique furniture would fit perfectly in the 100-year-old house. So that's what we did. We painted and decorated like crazy for 2 weeks, then hired a moving firm to deliver the furniture. Jessica's things were packed and stored in my garage. The house still required a tremendous amount of work, and the interior rooms were not completely finished, but we moved the furniture in anyway. We both admitted the house felt like a home, and we were both pleased with our efforts. Jessica, go home, shower, put on some fancy clothes, and we'll go out to eat to celebrate, I said. She thought for a moment, then asked, do you mean go out as in a date? Yes, I replied. Okay, I'll pick you up in an hour. We both thought about it, and then realized our old house no longer had furniture or clothing since everything had been packed. Jessica had intended to check into a cheap hotel until she could find an apartment. Let's get your suitcases out of the car, and you can stay in the guest bedroom until you can sort out a place to stay, I said. You can use the shower in the hall opposite your bedroom. I wasn't sure what clothes Jessica had in her suitcases, but when she came downstairs, she was dazzling. Not just beautiful, but definitely sexy and classy. You look wonderful, I told her. I had forgotten how well you clean up. Thanks. I don't have a lot of clothes to choose from since I hadn't expected to be going out to dinner. We shared a bottle of wine during dinner, and although we both ate, I think we were too nervous to appreciate the food. There was a band playing in the bar, so after we finished eating, we found a table in the bar area. The band was playing golden oldies, which were perfect for dancing, and I soon found Jessica in my arms. She commented on how hard my body felt. I asked, is that a good thing or bad? Oh, it's good. Believe me, she replied. We returned to our table, and I excused myself to use the bathroom. When I returned, Jessica was still at the table. I asked if anyone had asked her to dance, and she just replied that a couple of men had approached her, but that she told them she was waiting for me. Even after I returned, men were asking Jessica to dance, and she always had the same reply that she was saving her dances for her man. I got up to refill our drinks, and a woman at the bar started flirting with me. I talked to her a minute too long, and Jessica approached the lady, saying, honey, this man is mine. Go put your hooks in someone else. On the way back to the house, Jessica thanked me for a wonderful evening and apologized for ruining it. You were acting like we're a couple again, she said. I wanted to show my appreciation and take you out to eat, and you assumed we were together again, I said. I'm not sure what to make of the situation. We didn't say much the remainder of the night, but the next morning, she got up and went looking for an apartment. For the first time in weeks, I was working on my own, and I discovered that I missed my partner. Jessica came back later that afternoon looking dejected. I didn't find an acceptable apartment, she said. I'm going to check into a cheap hotel that has weekly rates. I thought for a moment. Jessica, I've spent the day thinking. I would like you to continue to sleep in the spare bedroom. We can bring all of your things in tomorrow and unpack them. This is a huge step for me, so please don't make any assumptions and just give us some space. I know you aren't seeing anyone, but if you do, I ask that you not bring a man into this house, I added. He'll take you up on your offer, she said. I had no luck today and didn't realize how hard it would be trying to find an apartment. I understand about the space, and I totally agree. As far as bringing anyone back to the house, I haven't dated or had sex with anyone since I cheated on you at that last conference, she confessed. I've undergone months of counseling since then, and am not the same person I was. I've realized since the first day you started working with me that you've changed. You're more like the Ed I was married to before you got that promotion. I like the current you much better. She agreed to do the shopping, cooking, and laundry in lieu of rent. That was an even trade in my book. We continued to work on the house. If a room that needed work contained furniture, we moved the furniture to another room. We retiled the bathrooms and refinished the hardwood floors. We weren't working quickly, but we were meticulous. I continued to go to the gym in the evening. My trainers were impressed with my boxing skills and encouraged me to enter an amateur boxing competition that was approaching. Because of my age, I would be boxing in my age group, not by weight. I had never done any competitive sports at all and was nervous. The match was scheduled during the day, so Jessica and I took the day off. Jessica was more nervous than I was and wouldn't stop fidgeting. My trainer became my manager and assisted in my corner. My first opponent, although in the same age group, was larger than me but not as agile. The match was only 3 rounds, and I took a beating in the first 2 before laying out my opponent in the third. He didn't have the stamina to do 3 rounds, and I made him suffer for it. I was exhausted when I was declared the winner, but I was still standing while my opponent was on the floor being treated. I was given a 2-day break before my next opponent. He was a better boxer and gave as good as he got, and we were both standing at the end. The judges ruled in my favor by 1 point. After another 2-day break, I was back for the championship title. My opponent had been a semi-pro boxer in his teens, but then dropped out and only returned to boxing recently. He was a year older than me and in great shape, but proved to be a worthy adversary. I was on the floor in the first round, but then I had him on the floor in the second round. In the third and last round, we stood in the middle of the ring and just duked it out, neither of us giving or taking an inch. After a full 60 seconds of this, he dropped his right hand, giving me an open target, and I connected, sending him to the floor. He was out cold. The crowd erupted, cheering and shouting. Suddenly, Jessica was in the ring, hugging me and wouldn't let go. She had been very frightened for me to even take part, and now she was the proudest woman in the arena. I scanned the audience and realized that many of the cheering crowd were our friends or relatives. I had not told anyone about the competition, so she must have gotten the word out. Even our children were ringside. My match was the last in the competition, so the awards followed. I was crowned champion for my age group and received a large trophy. Jessica immediately congratulated me with a big hug and kiss. She had, without my knowledge, arranged a party afterward at one of the larger restaurants. This was the first time since our split that we were both together in the company of our children and their families. There was no awkwardness at all. There were many friends I had not seen because they just dropped off the radar after the divorce, but everyone congratulated me and showered me with compliments. Most remembered me as a pudgy fat guy, but no one recognized me as I entered the ring except, of course, Jessica. We continued the renovation, and the house was finally together. We were still sleeping in separate bedrooms and, of course, not having sex, but otherwise, we were a couple. We went everywhere together and shared everything. Jessica even started going to the gym with me in the evening. We both knew a day was coming when I would be forced to deal with our state of affairs, but neither of us talked about it. However, the situation lingered on my mind. When Jessica's bathroom was being worked on, she began using my bathroom off the master bedroom. One day, I forgot she was showering and entered the bathroom. I had forgotten how perfect her body was, even at the age of 54. I had purposely built a large shower with many shower heads, and it was big enough for 3 or 4 people. It took all my willpower not to crawl in with her. Seeing her with no clothes on really got my heart racing, but I didn't know what to do. I knew she would have me back in a heartbeat if I asked her, and she would share my bed even quicker. I knew the situation was completely in my hands, and I was very tempted. True to her word, Jessica never tried to reconcile with me. I needed to talk to my children, who knew our situation, so I set up a conference call. I explained my feelings and asked what I should do concerning their mother. My daughter asked me to remember the day Jessica went looking for an apartment and how lost I was. I remembered only too well. My daughter then said, "If you push Mom away now, how will you feel?" I said, "Empty and lost." Because by now, I've totally gotten used to her being around. We're having a great time together, so why kick her out? That was my answer. It had been right in front of me all along. We had become great friends, but without benefits, and I needed the benefits. That night, I took Jessica out to one of the better restaurants in town. We shared a bottle of our favorite wine. "Jessica, are you happy?" I asked. She looked at me for a moment and then replied, "Yes. There are things that are missing, but yes, I am very happy." "What is missing that would make your life complete?" Jessica looked at me like she really didn't want to answer. "I'm really not comfortable answering, but since you asked, I miss the intimacy that we used to share. I miss the smell of your body. I miss sleeping in the same bed as you. I miss the sex we used to have. Do you really want me to continue? Do you think we can go back to where we used to be?" I asked. "That's impossible," she replied. "We've both changed. Neither of us are the same person we were before our divorce. I think we've both grown, and speaking for myself, I feel like a different person. I've not only regained the values I somehow lost, but found a few new ones. I would like to get past my mistakes. Would you consider moving back into my bedroom? Let's take it slow, and maybe in time we can get back to where we used to be," she added. I didn't say a word and just walked out. Jessica and I reconciled, but we never remarried. I told her I would never get married again, and that our relationship needed to start fresh like we never met before. Only then could I ever get over what she did to me. We are now a couple in every sense of the word and are in love. We continued to renovate the old house until it met our satisfaction, and now we are extremely proud of it. Jessica and I did most of the work ourselves, having never done anything like this before. Once the house was finished, we started landscaping the yard. I still go to the gym and still box, although I don't plan on entering any more competitions. Neither of us plans to work again, but we live on my pension and our investments. We aren't rich or even comfortable, but we do okay. You don't need a lot of money if you're in love. Thanks for watching. What do you think? Did they find true happiness? Share your thoughts below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.